Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I bought the place cheap because no one else wanted it. The previous owner had vanished, and the realtor brushed off the rumors. On the third night, I stepped on a loose floorboard. It creaked weird, hollow, but not like air beneath it. I pried it open and found rusted chains embedded into the beams. Thick ones wrapped around a metal loop like something or someone had been tied down there. But what made my skin crawl was the patch of dried blood smeared across the wood. And in the far corner of the crawl space, a small, locked box waited for me. The box was heavier than I expected. Metal, painted green once, but most of it had chipped away. I carried it to the kitchen counter and stared at it while my coffee grew cold. The lock was old, the kind you'd find on a diary or a small safe. I found a screwdriver in the junk drawer and worked at it until the metal gave way with a sharp click. Inside were photographs, not the kind you'd expect to find hidden beneath someone's floor. They were surveillance photos, all taken from a distance. A woman walking into what looked like a grocery store. The same woman sitting in a car. Another shot of her standing in front of a house, keys in her hand. Her face was circled in red ink on every single photo. Beneath the photos was a notebook. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. Dates, locations, times of day. Someone had been watching this woman for months. The entries started casual, noting when she left for work, when she came home, what she wore. But they became more detailed, more invasive. What she ate for breakfast, which window she left open, when she showered. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking slightly. The last entry was different. It simply said, "She knows." I set the notebook down and walked back to the loose floorboard. The hole seemed deeper now, darker. I grabbed a flashlight and aimed it into the space. The chains were still there, but I noticed something else. Scratches in the wood, fresh enough that they hadn't been worn smooth. Someone had clawed at the beams. The smell hit me then, faint but unmistakable, sweet and metallic like copper pennies left in the sun. I covered my nose and backed away, but the odor seemed to follow me. I called the police the next morning. 2 officers came out, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. They examined the chains, took some photos, and asked me a few questions about the previous owner. Did I know him? Had I seen him around? I told them what little I knew. He'd lived alone, kept to himself, disappeared sometime during the winter. One of the officers, a woman with tired eyes, picked up the notebook and flipped through it. Her expression changed as she read. She whispered something to her partner, who leaned over to look. They both glanced at me, then back at the notebook. "We'll need to take this as evidence," she said, "and we'll need to process the scene more thoroughly." They returned the next day with a forensics team. I watched from the kitchen window as they worked, taking measurements, collecting samples, photographing everything. The woman officer came to the door around midday. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Have you noticed anything unusual since you moved in? Sounds, smells, anything out of place?" I told her about the odor, the scratches, the way the house seemed to hold its breath in the quiet moments. She nodded, making notes. "The woman in the photographs," I said. "Did you find her?" The officer's pen stopped moving. "What makes you ask that?" "The way you looked at the notebook, like you recognized something." She closed her notepad and looked at me for a long moment. "We're still investigating, but I need you to understand something. This case might not have the ending you're expecting." They finished their work by evening, but they didn't tell me what they'd found. The house felt different after they left, empty but not in a peaceful way, like something had been disturbed that should have stayed buried. I tried to continue my normal routine, but the notebook haunted me. I kept thinking about the woman in the photographs, wondering if she was still out there somewhere, or if she'd become another victim of whatever had happened in this house. A week later, I found more photographs, not hidden this time, but slipped under my front door while I slept. They showed me, walking to my car, standing in the kitchen, reading the notebook. The same careful handwriting was on the back of each photo. Now you know too. I called the police again, but the tired-eyed officer told me they'd reached a dead end. The previous owner had no family, no close friends. The woman in the original photographs had been reported missing months ago, but there was no concrete evidence linking her disappearance to the house. "Sometimes cases go cold," she said. "Sometimes people just vanish." But I knew better. I'd seen the chains, smelled the copper scent, felt the weight of someone's obsession in my hands. The previous owner hadn't vanished. He'd been watching, waiting, and now he was watching me. I still live in the house. I replaced the floorboard, painted over the scratches, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being observed. Sometimes I catch movement in my peripheral vision or hear footsteps on the floor above when I'm in the basement. The odor returns occasionally, faint but persistent. The woman in the photographs is still missing. The case remains open but inactive. And somewhere in the shadows of this house, I suspect the truth is waiting to be discovered by someone brave enough to look deeper than I was willing to go. The chains are still there beneath the new floorboard. I check them sometimes just to make sure they're real. They are. And sometimes when the house is very quiet, I can hear them moving. Crime too, I always thought the house was quiet, too quiet. But sometimes I could hear faint breathing like someone was behind the walls. When I drilled into one of the plaster panels during a remodel, I discovered a narrow channel running through the interior. Not pipes, not wires, just open space. Lining the walls were holes carved from the inside out, perfectly round like eyepieces. As I followed the path, I realized they were all angled toward one spot, the bathroom. The holes weren't for air or pests, they were for watching, and in the attic, someone had left behind a chair. The chair was wooden, old but sturdy, the kind you'd find in any suburban home, but the seat was worn smooth in the center, polished by years of use. Beneath it, scratched into the floorboards, were tiny marks, tallies, hundreds of them grouped in sets of 5. I counted 47 complete sets. Someone had been keeping track. The real estate agent never mentioned any of this. She talked about the previous owner like he was just another elderly man who lived alone for decades, a quiet neighbor who kept to himself, the kind of person who mowed his lawn every Sunday and never caused trouble, the kind of person who disappears into the background of suburban life. But the holes told a different story. I started mapping them, following the channels through the walls with a flashlight. The network was extensive, more sophisticated than I'd initially thought. Every room had access points. The kitchen, the living room, both bedrooms. But the bathroom had the most, 7 different angles positioned to capture every corner of the space. That's when I found the notebooks. They were hidden behind a loose panel in the basement, wrapped in plastic bags to keep them dry. Dozens of composition books, the kind children use in school, each one filled with handwriting in black ink, dates, observations, detailed descriptions. The entries went back 20 years. The first notebook started simple, weather patterns, temperature readings, the sound of pipes settling. But as I read deeper, the entries became more specific. Footsteps overhead, running water, the creak of floorboards in the master bedroom. Someone had been documenting every sound, every movement in the house above. By the third notebook, the observations became personal. The previous tenant, a woman who lived here before me, had routines. She showered every morning before work. She talked to herself while cooking dinner. She cried on Tuesday nights, always Tuesday nights, for reasons the observer couldn't determine. The handwriting was careful, methodical, not the scrawl of someone mentally unstable, but the precise documentation of someone conducting research. Someone who believed this surveillance was justified, necessary, important. I called the real estate agent. She seemed surprised by my questions about the previous owner. Everyone had assumed he was harmless, she said. He'd lived in the house next door for 30 years, never married, worked as a maintenance supervisor at the local school district. When he passed away, his estate sold both properties together, his house and this one. Both properties, he'd owned the house I was living in. The house where a woman had lived alone for years, unknowing that every private moment was being recorded in neat handwriting. The notebooks contained more than observations. They contained judgments, criticisms of the woman's habits, her appearance, her visitors. The observer had strong opinions about how she should live her life, about what she should wear, about who she should trust. The entries became increasingly possessive, references to protecting her, guiding her toward better choices, watching over her like a guardian angel who could see through walls. I found photographs tucked between the pages, not explicit images but careful shots taken through the holes. The woman reading in her living room, making coffee in the morning, talking on the phone. The angles were perfect, the lighting calculated. This wasn't casual voyeurism. This was art in the observer's mind. The final notebook ended abruptly. The last entry was different from the others, shorter, more emotional. It simply read, "She knows, the drilling sounds gave me away. She keeps looking at the walls now. She's going to leave. I can't let her leave." The woman had moved out 2 months before the previous owner died. According to the real estate agent, she'd broken her lease suddenly, left most of her furniture behind, and refused to give a forwarding address. The landlord had been frustrated but let it go. People move unexpectedly all the time. I contacted the police. They were polite but uninterested. The previous owner was dead. The woman had moved away years ago. No crime had been reported. No evidence of actual harm. The notebooks were disturbing, they agreed, but voyeurism charges require proof of intent and living victims willing to press charges. The detective I spoke with suggested I fill in the holes, change the locks, and move on. These things happen, he said. You can't prosecute dead people for being creepy. But I kept reading. I kept following the channels through the walls. I kept finding new hiding places, new caches of documentation. The man next door had been more than an observer. He'd been a collector, a curator of someone else's life. The basement revealed the extent of his collection. Boxes of items that didn't belong to him. A hairbrush, a coffee mug, a book with notes in the margins. Personal items that had somehow found their way from her house to his. Items that told the story of someone learning to live under constant, invisible surveillance. I tried to locate the woman. The few details in the notebooks gave me enough information to start searching, but every lead ended in dead ends, phone numbers disconnected, addresses abandoned, employment records that stopped abruptly. Either she'd worked very hard to disappear, or someone had worked very hard to make her disappear. The more I investigated, the more I realized I was walking in the footsteps of someone who had already walked this path, someone who had asked these same questions, someone who had found these same answers. The final box I discovered contained letters, not sent letters, but drafts. Dozens of drafts of letters addressed to the woman, written in the same careful handwriting. Apologies, explanations, declarations of love, threats disguised as concern. Most were never finished. The observer would start writing, then stop, then crumple the paper and start again. The few complete letters painted a picture of someone who believed he was protecting her from herself, from the world, from choices that would hurt her. The last letter was different. It was sealed, addressed, stamped, but never mailed. The envelope was yellowed with age, the stamp curled at the edges. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words, "I'm sorry you left." I spent weeks trying to understand what had happened in this house, whether the woman had discovered the surveillance and fled, whether she'd confronted her observer, whether she'd simply felt the wrongness of the situation and trusted her instincts to leave. But the more I learned, the more I realized I was asking the wrong questions. The real question wasn't what had happened to her. The real question was what was happening to me. I'd been living in this house for 6 months. I'd found the holes, the notebooks, the photographs. I'd mapped the surveillance network, documented the evidence, contacted the authorities. I'd become obsessed with understanding the previous owner's obsession. But I hadn't filled in the holes. I hadn't changed the locks. I hadn't moved out. Instead, I'd been reading about her, learning about her habits, her preferences, her fears. I'd been studying the photographs, analyzing the handwriting, following the same paths through the walls that he had followed. I'd been sitting in his chair in the attic, looking down at the house below, wondering what she'd been thinking during those Tuesday night crying sessions, wondering why she'd stayed as long as she had, wondering what had finally made her leave. The notebooks were still in the basement, the holes were still in the walls, the chair was still in the attic, and I was still here, reading about a woman who'd lived in this house years ago, trying to understand why someone would spend decades watching another person's life unfold. But understanding and participating aren't the same thing. I tell myself I'm investigating. I tell myself I'm seeking justice. I tell myself I'm different from the man who used to live next door. But late at night, when the house is quiet, too quiet, I find myself listening for sounds that aren't there, watching for shadows that don't exist, wondering about the woman who used to live here and why she never came back for the things she left behind. The holes in the walls are still there, the chair in the attic is still there. The notebooks in the basement are still there. And I'm still here, asking questions I'm not sure I want answered. Crime 3, after a power outage, my backup battery kicked in and sent me a notification. That's how I found the footage. The camera I installed for my pets had picked up movement in the hallway, but I wasn't home. The footage showed a figure walking around, calmly opening drawers, flipping through my journals, and then staring straight into the camera like they knew it was there. The real terror came later when I checked older footage. The same figure had been visiting for weeks, always quiet, always deliberate, and every time they left behind something, small changes I never noticed before. I started reviewing every file, frame by frame. The figure wore dark clothing, moved with familiarity through my space. They knew where I kept my spare keys, knew which floorboards creaked, knew exactly how to avoid triggering the motion sensors everywhere else. This wasn't random. This person had studied my routine, mapped my home, understood my habits better than I understood them myself. The journals they read contained my deepest thoughts, my fears, my daily observations about neighbors, coworkers, family members, personal details I'd never shared with anyone. Pages had been photographed with a phone camera. I could see the flash reflecting off the paper in the security footage. Someone was building a profile of me, collecting ammunition for something I couldn't yet comprehend. My hands shook as I scrolled through older recordings. The visits started months ago, always during my predictable absences. Work schedules, grocery runs, gym sessions, they'd mapped my entire life. But the most disturbing discovery came when I noticed items that had been moved, then replaced. A coffee mug turned slightly clockwise, a book positioned differently on the shelf, my toothbrush angled the wrong way. These weren't accidents, they were messages. I contacted a security consultant who specialized in stalking cases. She examined the footage with professional detachment, pointing out details I'd missed. The intruder's height, approximate weight, the way they favored their left hand. But when she asked about recent changes in my relationships, work dynamics, or social connections, I realized how isolated I'd become. The list of people with potential access to my home was disturbingly long. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My upstairs neighbor mentioned seeing someone matching the intruder's description leaving my building on multiple occasions, always carrying what looked like a small bag or briefcase, always walking with purpose, never appearing suspicious or hurried. This person belonged here, moved through the environment like they had every right to be present. I installed additional cameras, changed my locks, altered my routines, but the visits continued. The intruder adapted to every security measure, found new ways to enter, new times to visit. They left behind increasingly personal tokens, copies of my own photographs, printouts of my social media posts, even recordings of my phone conversations. Someone was building a shrine to my existence, documenting every aspect of my life with obsessive precision. The police dismissed my concerns initially. No property was stolen, no direct threats were made, no evidence of physical harm. The intruder was technically trespassing, but proving their identity required more substantial evidence than blurry security footage. I was told to be patient, to keep documenting, to wait for the perpetrator to make a mistake that would lead to their identification. But patience became impossible when I discovered the photos. Hidden in my own belongings, tucked between book pages, taped under drawer bottoms, hundreds of images of me sleeping, eating, working, living my daily life. Some were taken from inside my home, others from outside windows, some from angles that suggested hidden cameras I'd never found. The realization that I'd been watched for potentially years made my skin crawl with invisible violations. The final piece of evidence changed everything. A voice recording device, smaller than a coin, attached to the underside of my kitchen table. It contained weeks of my private phone calls, conversations with friends, even my own thoughts when I talked to myself while cooking or cleaning. But the most chilling discovery was a conversation I didn't remember having, my own voice, apparently speaking to someone else, discussing intimate details about my life, my fears, my secrets. I had no memory of this conversation. The voice was mine, but the words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. Either I was losing my mind, or someone had technology sophisticated enough to manipulate my own voice, to create conversations that never happened, to build false evidence of my complicity in my own surveillance. The security consultant's expression changed when she heard the recording. She'd seen cases like this before, she explained quietly. Sometimes the line between victim and perpetrator became blurred. Sometimes people documented their own lives so obsessively that they forgot what was real and what was constructed. Sometimes the intruder was someone closer than they wanted to admit. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating regularly, stopped trusting my own memories. Every shadow in my peripheral vision could be real or imagined. Every sound in the walls could be an intruder or just the building settling. Every familiar object could be evidence of violation or simply my increasingly paranoid imagination transforming innocent details into sinister clues. The footage continues to accumulate, the visits haven't stopped, but now I watch myself watching the recordings, creating new layers of surveillance, new questions about what's real and what's been constructed. The camera captures me reviewing evidence, but it also captures my growing obsession with my own violation. I've become both the investigator and the subject of my own case. Sometimes I wonder if the intruder is still out there, or if they've already achieved their goal. They've turned me into someone who documents their own life with the same obsessive precision they once used to study me. I've become the very thing I was trying to catch, watching myself with the same uncomfortable intimacy that someone else once used to invade my privacy. The truth is somewhere in these recordings, but finding it requires accepting that I might not like what I discover. The person on the other side of the camera might be someone I know, someone I trust, someone who has every right to be exactly where they are. The most terrifying possibility isn't that a stranger violated my home, it's that I might be the one who's been lying to myself about what really happened here. Crime 4, I was digging a trench to plant shrubs when the shovel hit something hard. It wasn't a rock, it was metal. I uncovered an old suitcase sealed with a thick padlock. The case itself was dented and stained. When I forced it open, I expected garbage. What I found were dozens of photographs, candid shots of people in their homes, unaware they were being watched. Some images were decades old. In the bottom of the case was a tape recorder and a roll of undeveloped film. But what froze me was the last photo. It was my house, and I was in the window. The photograph was crisp, professional quality. Someone had stood in my backyard using a telephoto lens to capture me washing dishes. The angle was perfect, the lighting deliberate. I remembered that evening I'd been on the phone with my sister discussing our mother's estate. The conversation had been private, personal, yet someone had been watching, documenting. I spread the other photographs across my kitchen table. Each one told a story of violation. A woman reading in her bedroom, a man watching television in his living room, children playing in a basement. The subjects were unaware, vulnerable, living their lives while someone observed from the shadows. The quality suggested this wasn't amateur work. This was methodical, practiced. The tape recorder was an old model, the kind used for interviews. When I pressed play, static filled the room, then voices emerged. Conversations recorded through windows, phone calls intercepted, private moments stolen and preserved. I recognized my own voice discussing my work schedule with a colleague. The recording was clear, intimate. Someone had been close enough to hear everything. I developed the roll of film at a local shop, claiming it was from a deceased relative's belongings. The technician handed me the prints without comment, but I caught something in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. The images were more of the same. Surveillance photographs of ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware they were being documented. That weekend, I visited my neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived on the street for decades. She invited me in for coffee, and I showed her some of the photographs, claiming I'd found them in my mother's belongings. Her face grew pale when she saw them. She recognized several of the subjects, former neighbors, people who had moved away, some who had died. The photographs spanned decades, suggesting a long-term operation. She told me about the previous owner of my house, a quiet man who had worked in electronics. He kept to himself, rarely spoke to neighbors, always seemed to be carrying cameras or recording equipment. He died suddenly, and the house had sat empty for months before I bought it. She mentioned that strange things had happened after his death. People reported feeling watched, finding evidence someone had been in their yards, discovering their trash had been searched. I returned home with new questions. In my basement, I found a hole in the foundation that had been recently patched. Behind the patch was a small room, barely large enough for a person to crouch in. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them, and the floor was covered with recording equipment. This wasn't just observation, this was obsession. The room contained detailed notes about each subject. Names, schedules, personal habits, family relationships. The handwriting was meticulous, almost medical in its precision. My file was there too, thicker than the others. Pages of observations about my routines, my visitors, my phone conversations. Someone had been studying me for months before I'd even moved in. I contacted the police, but they seemed skeptical. The previous owner was dead, they said. The case was circumstantial. Without a specific crime, there was little they could do. They suggested I install security cameras, change my locks, be more careful about my privacy. Their dismissal felt like abandonment. I kept digging, literally and figuratively. I found more buried containers in my yard, each filled with evidence of surveillance. Photographs of my daily routines, recordings of my conversations, detailed maps of my movements. The depth of the invasion was staggering. Someone had turned my life into a research project. The most disturbing discovery was a journal buried deeper than everything else. The entries were written in the same meticulous handwriting, but they read like love letters. The author described watching me, learning my habits, feeling connected to my life. The language was intimate, possessive. The final entry was dated just days before I'd moved in. It ended with a single line, "The work continues." I realized then that the previous owner's death might not have ended the surveillance. The equipment in the basement was too sophisticated for one person. The operation was too extensive, too organized. Someone else had been involved, someone who was still alive, still watching. The thought made my skin crawl. I began to notice things I'd missed before. Cars that lingered too long on my street. Footprints in my garden that weren't mine, the feeling of being watched whenever I was alone. The paranoia was consuming, but I couldn't shake the evidence. The photographs, the recordings, the detailed notes, they were real, tangible proof of violation. The most terrifying realization came when I found a recent photograph buried in my yard. It showed me discovering the original suitcase, my face clearly visible as I opened it. Someone had been watching me uncover their secret. They documented my shock, my fear, my growing understanding. I wasn't just a victim of past surveillance. I was an active subject being studied, recorded, analyzed. I don't know who's watching me now. The previous owner is dead, but his work continues. Someone else has taken over, someone who knows I've discovered their operation. They're letting me find evidence, letting me piece together the truth. Perhaps this is part of their study. How does a subject react when they realize they're being observed? How do they behave when they know they're never truly alone? The photographs keep appearing, the recordings continue. My file grows thicker with each passing day. I've become part of something larger, something that extends far beyond my understanding. The suitcase in my yard wasn't an ending, it was an invitation, and I'm still being watched, still being documented, still being studied. The work continues, and I'm no longer sure if I'm the investigator or the subject. Crime 5, it looked like a deal, downtown location, low rent, spacious, but the inside was strange. The bedroom had 4 locks on the inside, bolt, chain, slide, and key. The windows were nailed shut even though they had secure screens. I didn't question it until I found scratches near the door like someone had clawed at it from the inside. Then I saw marks on the ceiling, faint shoe prints, like someone had stood there pressed to the top. When I confronted the landlord, they just said, "It's safer this way." That night I heard someone knock from inside the closet. I should have left then, but the rent was a quarter of what I'd been paying, and I needed the money for other things. The landlord was a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and hands that shook when she counted the security deposit. She wouldn't meet my gaze directly, always looking past my shoulder as if someone might be standing behind me. The apartment smelled like industrial cleaner, the kind that burns your nostrils. Underneath it was something else, something sweet and cloying that made my stomach turn. I opened every window I could, but half of them were painted shut and the others had been nailed closed from the outside. The landlord said it was for security, but I noticed the nails were on the inside frame too, as if someone had been trying to keep something in rather than out. That first week I tried to settle in. I hung pictures over the worst of the wall damage, long scratches that looked deliberate, carved deep into the drywall. Some were at shoulder height, others much lower, as if made by someone crawling. The scratches formed patterns that almost looked like letters, but I couldn't make out what they were trying to say. The neighbors were quiet, too quiet. I'd see them in the hallway sometimes, and they'd nod politely but never speak. Their eyes would dart to my door, then away, as if they knew something I didn't. One woman, elderly with silver hair, stopped me by the mailboxes. She leaned close and whispered, "You hear anything strange, you call the police right away. Don't wait." When I asked what she meant, she just shook her head and walked away. I started sleeping badly. The apartment was too quiet during the day and too loud at night. Footsteps in the hallway would stop right outside my door, pause for minutes, then continue. Sometimes I'd hear muffled voices through the walls, but I could never make out words. The sounds seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, as if the building was hollow. 3 weeks in, I found the first photograph. It was wedged behind the radiator in the bedroom, crumpled and stained. A Polaroid of a young woman with dark hair, smiling at the camera. She was sitting in what looked like my kitchen, wearing a red sweater I'd never seen before. The date stamp showed it was taken 2 years ago, but something about her smile looked forced, like she was trying to hide fear. I took the photo to the landlord. She glanced at it, then quickly looked away. Previous tenant, she said, left some things behind. But when I asked about contacting her to return the photo, the landlord claimed she had no forwarding address, no phone number, nothing. She paid cash, she said, kept to herself. That night I searched the apartment more thoroughly. Behind the kitchen cabinets I found more photographs, dozens of them, all of the same woman, all taken in my apartment. In some she looked happy, in others she looked tired, worn down. The later photos showed her looking over her shoulder as if she knew someone was watching. In the last few, she wasn't smiling at all. I also found a journal tucked under a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, but the words made my blood run cold. She wrote about feeling watched, about hearing footsteps in the hallway that would stop outside her door. She wrote about someone trying the locks at night, testing them one by one. She wrote about the landlord's visits, how they became more frequent, more intrusive. The final entry was different. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "He has a key. He's been coming in while I sleep. I found things moved, clothes touched. The locks don't work. He gets in anyway. I think he's in the walls. I think he's watching me write this." I called the police the next morning. The officer who came was young, bored-looking. He took notes while I explained about the photographs, the journal, the strange behavior of the landlord. He said it sounded like the previous tenant had some mental health issues, that these kinds of delusions were common in people living alone. He suggested I might be letting the stress of moving affect my judgment. But I knew what I'd found, I knew what I'd read. I started my own investigation, talking to neighbors, searching public records. The woman in the photographs had a name, an identity. She'd worked at a coffee shop downtown, had friends who worried when she suddenly stopped showing up. She'd paid her rent on time, kept to herself, never caused any trouble. Then one day she was gone, no forwarding address, no explanation. The landlord claimed she'd moved out in the middle of the night, left everything behind. But her friends said she'd been planning to stay, that she talked about finally feeling safe in her own space. I found her social media accounts still active but untouched for months. Her last post was a photo of her apartment door, all four locks clearly visible. The caption read, "Finally feel secure." But in the comments, someone had written, "Locks only work if you're the only one with keys." The more I dug, the more questions I had. The landlord's story kept changing. First, the woman had left voluntarily. Then she'd been evicted for non-payment. Then she'd had a breakdown and been hospitalized. Each version contradicted the last, but the landlord told them all with the same tired certainty. I started staying awake at night, listening. The footsteps in the hallway came regularly now, always stopping outside my door. I could hear breathing on the other side, soft and patient. Sometimes a shadow would block the light under the door, staying there for what felt like hours. The locks the previous tenant had trusted, the ones that had made her feel safe, were useless. I found scratches around the keyholes, evidence of tampering. The landlord's master key worked on all of them, but there were other marks too, signs that someone had been picking the locks, learning their mechanisms. I confronted the landlord again, this time with evidence. The photographs, the journal, the inconsistencies in her story. She listened without interrupting, her face blank and unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You're letting your imagination run away with you," she said finally. "People disappear all the time. They get scared, they run. It's not always sinister." But her hands were shaking again, and she wouldn't look at the photographs. She kept glancing at the door, as if expecting someone to walk in. That night I heard the knocking again, not from the hallway this time, but from inside the walls, soft, rhythmic tapping that seemed to move through the apartment. I followed the sound to the bedroom closet, where it was loudest. The knocking stopped when I opened the door, but I could smell something new, perfume, the same brand the woman in the photographs had worn. I called her friends the next day, people I'd found through social media. They painted a picture of someone who'd been excited about her new apartment, who'd felt safe for the first time in years. She'd been running from an abusive relationship, they said. The apartment was supposed to be her fresh start. But then she'd started acting strange. She'd become paranoid, convinced someone was following her. She'd stopped going out, stopped answering her phone. Her friends had tried to check on her, but she wouldn't answer the door. The last time anyone saw her, she'd looked thin and pale, like she hadn't been sleeping. I found myself checking the locks obsessively, the same way she must have. I'd test them before bed, then get up and test them again. But they offered no real security. The scratches around the keyholes were getting worse, as if someone was still working on them. The landlord's visits became more frequent. She'd show up at odd hours, claiming she needed to check something, fix something, inspect something. She'd walk through the apartment slowly, her eyes taking in every detail. Sometimes she'd pause at the bedroom door, running her fingers along the frame where the scratches were deepest. "Previous tenant did this," she'd say, but her voice lacked conviction. "Some people just can't handle living alone." I started documenting everything. The late-night visits, the sounds in the walls, the way shadows moved under the door. I took photographs of the scratches, measured them, compared them to the ones in the journal. They matched perfectly, but there were new ones too, fresh gouges in the wood that hadn't been there when I moved in. The truth was becoming clear, but it was a truth I didn't want to accept. The woman in the photographs hadn't disappeared voluntarily. She hadn't run away or had a breakdown. She'd been trapped, systematically terrorized by someone who had access to her apartment, someone who could come and go as they pleased. The landlord knew more than she was saying. Maybe she was involved, maybe she was just looking the other way. Either way, she was complicit in whatever had happened to the previous tenant. I should have left then. I should have packed my things and found somewhere else to live. But I couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the photographs, about how scared she must have been in her final days. Someone needed to know what had happened to her. Someone needed to care. The knocking in the walls was getting louder. Sometimes I could hear scratching too, fingernails against wood, desperate and persistent. I'd put my ear to the wall and listen, trying to understand what the sounds meant. They seemed to form a pattern, a rhythm that was almost like Morse code. I started researching the building's history, looking for clues about its construction, its previous owners. What I found made my blood run cold. The building had been renovated several times, with new walls added, spaces reconfigured. The apartments had been carved out of what was once a single large space, creating a maze of hidden passages and forgotten rooms. The sounds in the walls weren't coming from the plumbing or the heating system. They were coming from the spaces between the apartments, the hollow areas where someone could move unseen. Someone who knew the building's layout, who had access to all the units. I realized then that I was living in the same trap that had claimed the previous tenant. The locks were theater, meant to provide a false sense of security, while someone with a master key, someone who knew the building's secrets, watched and waited. The woman in the photographs had figured it out too, eventually. Her journal entries showed her growing awareness of the truth, her desperate attempts to protect herself. But the locks hadn't saved her, and they wouldn't save me either. I found her in the walls. Not her body, not exactly, but evidence of her final days hidden in the space behind the bedroom closet. A small cache of belongings, photographs, letters, personal items that proved she'd been trying to escape. And a final note written in the same shaky handwriting as the journal's last entry. If you're reading this, then you know, the landlord isn't who she claims to be. Neither are the other tenants. They're all part of it. The building is a trap, and I'm the bait. If something happens to me, look for the others. Look for the ones who came before. I never found out what happened to her. The police wouldn't investigate further, said there wasn't enough evidence of foul play. The landlord continued her story about the troubled tenant who'd moved away suddenly. The neighbors remained silent, averting their eyes when I tried to talk to them. But I know the truth now. I know what this place really is, what it's designed to do. And I know that I'm not the first person to live in this apartment, to find these photographs, to read that journal. The woman in the pictures was just one in a long line of victims, people who thought they'd found safety, but had actually walked into a carefully constructed nightmare. The knocking in the walls continues every night. Sometimes I think I can hear voices too, whispers of the ones who came before. They're trying to warn me, trying to tell me to run while I still can. But I can't leave, not yet, because somewhere in these walls, in these hidden spaces, is the evidence that could finally bring justice. The proof that could save the next person from walking into this trap. The locks on my door are just for show. The real prison is the building itself, and the jailer has keys to everything. But maybe, if I'm careful, if I'm smart, I can find a way to turn the trap around. Maybe I can be the one who finally breaks free. Or maybe I'll just become another photograph hidden behind the radiator, another journal tucked under the floorboards, another warning for the next tenant to find. The knocking has stopped now. The silence is somehow worse. Crime 6, the attic was supposed to be empty, just storage space. But when I pushed aside an old tarp, the wall sounded hollow. I knocked, then it gave way. Behind it was a small room, no bigger than a closet. On the floor, dozens of state ID cards and driver's licenses, all different names, all different faces. But every photo had one thing in common, the same background, my garage wall. Some of the cards had notes paperclipped to them. Addresses, strange codes, and red excess on a few corners. The most recent one had a photo that looked a lot like me. I sat there for what felt like hours, my fingers trembling as I sorted through the cards. Each one told a story I didn't understand. The photos were all taken in the same spot. I recognized the scratch on the wall behind the workbench, the way the light hit from the single bulb overhead. But I'd never taken these pictures. I'd never seen these faces before. The smell hit me then, something metallic, like old pennies left in a jar. It was coming from the cards themselves, as if they'd been stored somewhere damp and forgotten. I held one up to the light, a woman with dark hair, maybe 30. Her eyes looked tired, resigned. The note attached read simply, "Package delivered, code 7739, payment received." My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd bought this house 6 months ago. The previous owner was an elderly man who'd lived here for decades. He'd seemed harmless enough, quiet, kept to himself. But apparently he'd kept more than just to himself. I found myself returning to the attic every day after work. The cards drew me back like a puzzle I couldn't solve. I started organizing them by date, by the color of the paper clips, by the codes written on the notes. Patterns emerged that made my stomach turn. The red X marks seemed to follow a timeline. The addresses were scattered across the county, but they all shared something. They were all near bus stops, train stations, places where people came and went without notice. One evening, I decided to visit one of the addresses, a rundown apartment complex where the streetlights flickered and cast dancing shadows on cracked pavement. The building manager, a heavy-set woman with suspicious eyes, recognized the photo when I showed it to her. She said the woman had lived there briefly, paid cash, kept strange hours. Then one day, she just disappeared, left everything behind. The woman's apartment was still empty. The manager let me look inside, though I'm not sure why. Maybe she was as curious as I was. The place felt hollow, like a stage set after the play had ended. But in the bathroom, behind the mirror, I found something that made my blood run cold. More photos, not ID photos this time. Surveillance shots, people walking alone at night, getting into cars, entering buildings. All taken from a distance, all with that same clinical precision. I started having dreams about the garage. In them, I was standing behind the camera, directing people to smile, to look natural. But their faces were always wrong, too scared, too empty. I'd wake up with the taste of metal in my mouth and the sound of a camera shutter clicking in my ears. The investigation consumed me. I called the police, but they said the case was cold. The previous owner had died, and without evidence of an actual crime, there wasn't much they could do. The cards could be fake, they said. Maybe it was just some elaborate hobby, some eccentric collection. But I knew better. I could feel the weight of something darker in every photo, every note, every carefully coded message. I started visiting more addresses. Each one told the same story, people who lived quietly, paid in cash, then vanished without a trace. Landlords who remembered them as polite but distant. Neighbors who'd barely noticed they were gone. It was as if these people had been chosen specifically for their ability to disappear. Then I found the ledger. It was tucked inside a hollowed-out book in the hidden room, a detailed record of dates, amounts, and those same cryptic codes. The handwriting was careful, methodical. This wasn't the work of someone unhinged. This was business. The final entry was dated just a week before the previous owner's death. The amount was larger than the others, and the code was different. At the bottom, in that same careful script, final transaction, new arrangement needed. I realized then that I wasn't just living in someone else's house. I was living in their operation. The garage, the hidden room, the careful documentation, it was all part of something bigger, something that had been passed down, inherited like furniture or old family photos. But the most chilling discovery came when I found my own rental application in the old man's papers, not in his regular files, but in a folder labeled Prospects. My photo was paperclipped to the front, along with notes about my work schedule, my habits, my tendency to keep to myself. At the bottom, someone had written, "Suitable replacement, initiate contact." I never found out who the real victims were or what had happened to them. The trail went cold with the old man's death, but sometimes, late at night, I hear sounds from the garage, footsteps, the scrape of furniture being moved. And I wonder if I'm the one being watched now, if somewhere in this house, someone is keeping careful notes about my comings and goings. The ID cards are still in the attic. I tell myself I should destroy them, call the authorities again, do something. But part of me knows it wouldn't matter. The system is bigger than one house, one collection of photos. It's a network that feeds on people society has forgotten, people who won't be missed. And every morning when I look in the bathroom mirror, I see the same tired, resigned expression that was in those ID photos. I wonder if someone somewhere is already preparing my card, writing careful notes about my habits, waiting for the right moment to add me to their collection. The camera is still in the garage, covered by a dusty cloth. Sometimes I lift the corner and stare at it, wondering how many faces it's captured, how many stories it's helped erase. The background is exactly as I remembered, the scratch on the wall, the single bulb casting harsh shadows. I've started locking my doors at night, not because I think someone will break in, but because I'm afraid of what I might find myself doing if I don't. The operation needs to continue, after all. The careful documentation, the surveillance, the collection of faces that will never be seen again. And somewhere in the darkness, I can hear the soft click of a camera shutter, capturing one more image for the hidden room upstairs. Crime 7, sometimes I get packages left at the door. I'm used to phantom knocks, but this one felt different. I opened the door and found nothing, but the knob was sticky, something dark smeared on the metal. I checked the camera feed. The video showed someone knocking, but they never faced the camera, always hunched, always turned away. Then, without ever being touched, the door opened on its own. The figure didn't enter. Instead, they lined in and whispered something. The audio was garbled except for one word that stood out, a name I hadn't heard since I was a child, a name I'd buried. The smell hit me first when I rewound the footage, something metallic mixed with the faint scent of vanilla. I knew that combination. My hands started trembling as I adjusted the volume, trying to make out the whispered words. The audio crackled with static, but underneath it, I could hear breathing, heavy, deliberate. I wiped the dark substance from the doorknob with a paper towel. It wasn't blood, too thick, too dark. It stained my fingers with an oily residue that wouldn't wash off completely. The scent lingered on my skin, triggering memories I'd spent years trying to forget. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No postmark, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized but couldn't place. Inside was a photograph, old, faded, showing a group of children standing in what looked like a basement. I was in that photo, younger, smiling, standing next to someone whose face had been carefully scratched out with a pen. I called the police. The officer who came was polite but dismissive. No sign of forced entry, no real threat, just someone playing pranks. But he took the photograph, and I saw something flicker in his eyes when he looked at it. Recognition, maybe, or fear. The knocking returned that night. This time I didn't open the door. Instead, I watched through the peephole as the hunched figure stood there, perfectly still. They wore a coat I'd seen before, somewhere in the depths of my childhood. The fabric was worn with a distinctive tear near the left shoulder. I remembered reaching for that tear, small fingers trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Do you remember the game we used to play? I deleted it immediately, but the words echoed in my mind. There had been a game, hadn't there? Something we'd played in basements and abandoned houses. Something that had rules I couldn't quite recall, but that left me feeling sick and confused. The footage from that night showed the figure standing at my door for over an hour. They never moved, never knocked again, just stood there, breathing visible in the cold air. When I fast-forwarded through the video, I noticed something else, a second figure in the background, barely visible in the shadows between streetlights. This one was smaller, child-sized, but standing with the same hunched posture. I started having dreams, not nightmares exactly, but memories surfacing in fragments. A woman's voice calling my name, the smell of vanilla and something else, cleaning fluid maybe, the feeling of being watched, of being chosen for something I didn't understand. The photograph the police took was returned to me a week later with a note, no matches found in any database, but I knew they were lying. I could see it in the way the officer avoided my eyes, how he handed me the envelope without really looking at it. I began researching missing children cases from my childhood. Hours spent scrolling through database after database, looking for faces that matched the scratched-out figure in the photograph. The deeper I dug, the more patterns I found. Children who disappeared from my neighborhood, all around the same age I'd been in that photo. All with the same general description, quiet, easily influenced, from families that didn't ask too many questions. The knocking became a nightly occurrence, always the same figure, always the same hunched posture. I started recording everything, the sounds, the smells, the way the air seemed to change when they appeared. The recordings revealed details I'd missed, footsteps before the knocking, but too many footsteps for just one person. Whispered conversations just outside the range of clear audio. One night I finally opened the door while they were there. The figure didn't run or react. Instead, they slowly turned toward me, and I saw a face that was both familiar and completely wrong. Features I remembered, but aged in a way that didn't make sense. Eyes that held knowledge of things I couldn't name. "You were always the smart one," they said, their voice carrying the same cadence I remembered from childhood. The one who asked too many questions. I tried to speak, but my throat felt closed. The figure reached into their coat and pulled out another photograph. This one was newer, clearer. It showed the same basement from the first photo, but now there were other things there, items that looked like evidence, personal belongings that might have belonged to the missing children. "The game never ended," they continued. "We just got better at playing it." I slammed the door and called the police again. This time they took longer to arrive. When they finally came, they found no trace of anyone having been there. No footprints, no evidence of the conversation I'd recorded, but my phone showed nothing but static where the audio should have been. The officer who responded was different this time. Older, with tired eyes that seemed to recognize something in my story. He asked detailed questions about my childhood, about people I'd known, about memories I'd rather forget. When I mentioned the basement in the photographs, he became very still. "There was a case," he said quietly. "Years ago, we never found enough evidence to make arrests, but there were rumors about a group of adults who used children for their games. Children who were taught to recruit others, to identify the vulnerable ones." He left me with a card and a warning to be careful, but I could see in his expression that he knew more than he was telling me. That night, I found another envelope under my door. This one contained a key, old brass, with a tag that had my childhood address written on it. I drove to the house where I'd grown up. It had been abandoned for years, boarded up and forgotten, but the key fit the back door perfectly. Inside, the smell of vanilla and cleaning fluid was overwhelming. The basement was exactly as I remembered it from the photographs: concrete walls, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, and corners that seemed to hold too many shadows. On a shelf in the back corner, I found a box with my name on it. Inside were more photographs, documents, and a journal written in my own childish handwriting. The entries described games, rewards, and lessons about finding other children who might want to play, about identifying the ones who wouldn't be missed, who wouldn't be believed if they tried to tell. The final entry was dated just before my family moved away. It described a night when I'd brought another child to the basement, a friend who'd trusted me completely. The entry ended abruptly, but there was a photograph paperclipped to the page. It showed the same basement, but now there was something else there, a small pile of clothes, neatly folded in the corner. I closed the journal and climbed back upstairs. The house felt different now, heavier. In the kitchen, I found a note written in the same handwriting from the envelopes. "Thank you for coming home. The game can finally end." I left the house and drove directly to the police station. But when I tried to explain what I'd found, the words wouldn't come. The photographs I'd brought were blank. The journal was empty. Even the key had disappeared from my pocket. The officer from before was waiting for me. He looked older, more tired. "Sometimes," he said, "the only way to stop a game is to admit you were playing it." I never went back to that house. The knocking at my door stopped, but I still check the camera feed every night. Sometimes I see children playing in the street, and I wonder if they're playing the same games I once played, if they're learning the same lessons about trust and vulnerability. The dark substance on my doorknob was never identified. The photographs were never authenticated. The missing children cases remain unsolved, but I know now that some games never really end. They just find new players, new rules, new ways to continue. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that whispered name, the one I'd buried, the one I'd tried so hard to forget. It echoes in my dreams, reminding me that some secrets are too dangerous to keep, but too terrible to reveal. Crime 8, I didn't notice it at first. The lighting downstairs was poor and the ceiling always looked dark. But one day I replaced the bulbs and the paint was unmistakable, red, thick and uneven, like it had been slathered over something. I scraped at the corner, revealing a paler layer beneath. Then I found a small hole. I reached in and pulled out what looked like a dried-out rag, but it wasn't cloth, it was skin, tanned, brittle, and covered in ink. Symbols I didn't recognize burned into it. I called for help, but before anyone came, the ceiling started dripping again. The detective who answered my call had tired eyes and calloused hands. He examined the piece I'd found, turning it over under the harsh fluorescent light I'd installed. The symbols etched into the surface seemed to shift in the brightness, becoming more pronounced, more deliberate. He photographed everything, bagged the evidence, and told me they'd run tests. His partner, a younger woman with a notebook that never left her hands, asked about the previous owner. I knew little. The real estate agent had been vague, mentioning only that the house had been vacant for months. The paperwork showed a quick sale, cash transaction, no complications. But now, standing in my basement watching strangers document what might be human remains, I wondered what complications they'd hidden. The forensic team arrived within hours. They scraped samples from the ceiling, collected fragments of paint, and tested the substance that had been dripping. The lead technician, a methodical man who spoke in measured tones, confirmed what I'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. The red paint contained organic compounds, blood most likely, old blood mixed with commercial paint to create this grotesque camouflage. I moved upstairs while they worked, but the sounds carried through the floorboards. The scraping, the quiet conversations, the occasional pause that stretched too long. Through my kitchen window, I watched neighbors gather on their porches, whispering and pointing. One woman, elderly with silver hair pulled back severely, kept looking at my house and shaking her head. She approached me while the investigators were packing up. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she spoke. She'd lived across the street for decades, she said. She'd known the previous owner well. A quiet man who kept to himself, worked unusual hours, never had visitors, but she'd noticed things, deliveries at odd times, the smell of chemicals drifting from his basement windows, the way he'd watch from his upstairs window whenever children played in the street. The DNA results took weeks. The skin fragment belonged to a person who'd been reported missing 2 years prior, a young adult who disappeared while walking home from work. The case had gone cold quickly, no leads, no witnesses, no evidence, until now. I requested the police file, using my right as a concerned citizen whose property had become part of an active investigation. The missing person had been seen last near the convenience store 6 blocks from my house. Security footage showed them buying cigarettes and a soft drink, then walking in the direction of my street. But the footage from the next intersection was corrupted, unusable. The investigation had stalled there. The detective returned with more questions. Had I found anything else, any other unusual features in the house? I told him about the basement workshop I'd discovered behind a false wall, tools that seemed too clean, too organized, a workbench with restraints built into the surface, shelves lined with jars containing liquids I couldn't identify. The detective's expression darkened as I described each detail. The forensic team returned, this time with cadaver dogs. They searched every inch of my property, inside and out. The dogs alerted in 3 locations: the basement workshop, beneath the back porch, and in the far corner of the yard where the grass had never grown properly. The excavation began immediately. They found more remains, partial skeletal remains buried in carefully measured plots. Each burial site contained personal items, jewelry, clothing fragments, identification cards. The victims spanned 5 years, all young adults who disappeared without explanation. All had been reported missing within a 20-mile radius of my house. The previous owner's name was redacted from the files they showed me, but I learned he'd moved away abruptly, selling the house through a third party. No forwarding address, no contact information. His work history showed employment at a local manufacturing plant, but when investigators contacted the company, they claimed no record of him ever working there. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper. She found inconsistencies in the property records, gaps in the ownership history that didn't make sense. The house had been sold and resold multiple times in the past decade, often to shell companies that dissolved shortly after the transactions. Someone had been deliberately obscuring the paper trail. The neighbor across the street called me one evening. She'd been going through old photographs and found something she thought I should see. The pictures showed neighborhood block parties from years past, and in several of them, a figure could be seen watching from my basement windows. The same figure appeared in photos spanning several years, always in the background, always watching. But when I looked closer at the photographs, something else caught my attention. The figure in the basement windows wasn't the only one watching. In nearly every photo, someone else was positioned perfectly to observe both the festivities and whoever was in my basement. Someone who appeared in every shot, always with a clear view of both the street and my house. The private investigator made an appointment to meet me, but she never showed. When I called her office, they said she'd taken a sudden vacation. Her assistant seemed nervous, kept glancing toward the door while we spoke. She mentioned that my investigator had been asking questions about people who didn't want to be found, and that some questions were better left unanswered. I realized I'd been assuming the person who painted my ceiling red was gone. But what if they'd never left? What if they'd simply changed their approach, found a new way to stay close to their hunting ground? The more I investigated, the more I felt like I was being watched, evaluated, measured against some criteria I couldn't understand. The final report from the police department was inconclusive. They'd identified the victims, notified the families, and officially reopened the missing persons cases. But the perpetrator remained unknown, possibly deceased, possibly relocated. The detective advised me to install better security systems and stay vigilant. I never moved out of the house. Something about leaving felt like abandonment, like I'd be condemning the next owner to discover what I'd found. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that I was being studied, that my reactions to each revelation were being cataloged by someone who remained just out of sight. The basement ceiling has been repainted professionally this time. Clean white paint over fresh drywall, but sometimes in certain light I can still see the outline of what was there before, and sometimes when the house is perfectly quiet, I can hear sounds from the basement workshop that I sealed off months ago. I've learned to sleep with earplugs, but I still wake up sometimes, convinced I've heard footsteps on the stairs. When I check, there's never anyone there, just the faint smell of chemicals and the certainty that someone, somewhere, is still watching. Crime 9, the floorboards always creaked in that corner, but I never investigated until I spilled something near the wall. While cleaning, I saw faint outline metal rivets beneath the wood. I pulled up the boards and found a square hatch with a lock built in. It was old but not rusted. I broke it open and descended into a space no one should have been able to build. It was like a bunker, reinforced walls, medical equipment, and video monitors, one of which was still glowing. It showed a live feed of my bedroom, and in the corner of the frame, someone was waving. The waving stopped when I looked directly at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the empty frame showing my unmade bed, the pile of clothes I'd left on the chair. The angle was perfect, too perfect. Someone had been watching me sleep, dress, live my most private moments. The camera was hidden somewhere in my ceiling, probably behind the smoke detector I'd never bothered to check. I climbed back up, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. The screen was black, dead battery, though I'd charged it overnight. The landline had no dial tone. The silence pressed against my eardrums like water. I walked to my bedroom and stared at the smoke detector, its red light blinking innocently. When I reached for it, I noticed something else, a small hole in the wall behind my dresser, painted over but visible if you knew where to look. The basement space was larger than I'd first realized. Beyond the monitors, a narrow hallway led to what looked like a living area. Someone had been staying here. The bed was unmade, sheets still warm. A cup of coffee sat on a makeshift table, steam curling up from the surface. Fresh fruit in a bowl, magazines dated from last month. The smell hit me then, cologne, the same brand my ex used to wear. The same brand I'd been smelling in my apartment for weeks, thinking it was just lingering in my clothes. I found the notebook stacked neatly on a shelf, page after page of handwritten observations about my daily routine, what I ate for breakfast, what shows I watched when I left for work, when I returned. The handwriting was careful, methodical, clinical. The final entry was dated yesterday. Subject appears increasingly paranoid, checks locks multiple times, sleeps poorly, ready for phase 2. Phase 2, the words made my stomach turn. I flipped through more pages, looking for clues about who had written this. The observations went back months. Someone had been documenting my life in excruciating detail, noting patterns I hadn't even noticed about myself. They knew I always forgot to lock the back door after taking out trash. They They knew I left my bedroom window cracked open on warm nights. They knew everything. The medical equipment wasn't just for show. Syringes sealed in sterile packaging, vials of clear liquid with labels I couldn't read. A small refrigerator hummed in the corner, its contents hidden behind a locked door. On the wall, anatomical charts were marked with red ink, highlighting pressure points and nerve clusters. This wasn't just surveillance. This was preparation. I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate. Someone was walking through my apartment. The floorboards groaned under their weight as they moved from room to room. I held my breath, pressing myself against the cold concrete wall. The footsteps stopped directly above the closet. Dust fell from the ceiling as whoever was up there shifted their weight. A voice called down through the open hatch, my name spoken softly, almost tenderly. The same voice I'd been hearing in my dreams for weeks, thinking it was just stress-induced nightmares, but it was real. Someone had been whispering to me while I slept, so quietly I'd incorporated it into my dreams without ever fully waking. I needed to get out, but the only exit was through the hatch, and they were waiting. I searched the basement for another way out, running my hands along the walls, looking for any kind of opening. Behind a stack of boxes, I found another door, this one leading to a tunnel that stretched into darkness. The air smelled damp and earthy, like it connected to the old storm drains that ran under the building. As I crawled through the tunnel, I realized this wasn't random. Someone had planned this for months, maybe years. The basement wasn't just a hiding place, it was a hub. Other tunnels branched off in different directions, each one carefully constructed and maintained. Someone had been moving through the building's infrastructure, accessing multiple apartments, watching multiple people. I emerged through a grate in the parking garage, gasping in the cool air. My car was there, untouched, but when I reached for my keys, I realized they were still in my apartment. The security guard's booth was empty, the monitor showing static. I ran to the street, but it was eerily quiet. No traffic, no pedestrians, no signs of normal life. The police station was only a few blocks away, but when I got there, the doors were locked. A sign said they'd relocated temporarily due to maintenance, but I'd driven past this building yesterday, and there had been no sign of construction. I tried calling from a payphone, but the line was dead. Every payphone on the street had been disconnected. I walked back toward my building, staying in the shadows. From across the street, I could see my apartment window. The light was on, and a figure moved past the glass. They were still there, still in my space, probably going through my things. I watched for what felt like hours, trying to understand what was happening to me. That's when I saw her, the woman from the coffee shop, the one who'd been asking about my daily routine weeks ago. She'd seemed friendly, curious about the neighborhood. Now she stood in the alley beside my building, talking on a phone, gesturing toward my window. When she finished the call, she looked directly at where I was hiding and smiled. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. When I finally stopped, I was in a part of the city I didn't recognize. The streets were empty, the buildings dark. I found a diner that was still open and ordered coffee, trying to think clearly about what I'd discovered. The waitress brought my coffee and lingered at the table. She had kind eyes, concerned. She asked if I was okay, if I needed help. I started to tell her about the basement, the surveillance, the woman in the alley. She listened carefully, nodding at all the right moments. When I finished, she refilled my coffee and sat down across from me. "You've been having a difficult time," she said. "The stress of the move, the new job, the breakup. It's understandable that you'd feel paranoid." Move, new job, breakup. I stared at her, trying to remember. The details were fuzzy, like trying to recall a dream. Had I moved recently? When had I started my current job? When had my relationship ended? The memories felt distant, unreliable. She showed me a prescription bottle with my name on it, medication for anxiety and paranoia. She said I'd been taking it for months, that I'd been struggling with reality since the trauma. She was so gentle, so understanding. She knew exactly what to say to make me doubt everything I'd experienced. But I could still smell the cologne. I could still feel the warmth of those sheets in the basement. I could still hear my name being whispered in that tender, terrifying voice. The evidence was real, even if my memories were suspect. I left the diner and walked through the empty streets until dawn. When I finally returned to my building, the parking garage was full of cars again. People were going about their morning routines, walking dogs, getting coffee, living their normal lives. The security guard was back at his post, nodding at me as I passed. My apartment door was locked just as I'd left it. The closet floor was intact, no sign of the hatch I'd found. But the cologne smell was stronger now, and when I checked my phone, I found photos I didn't remember taking. Pictures of the basement, the monitors, the notebooks, proof that it had all been real. Or proof that I'd staged it all myself, in a state I couldn't remember. The photos could have been taken anywhere at any time. The basement could have been a movie set, an elaborate delusion, a carefully constructed fantasy designed to make me question my own sanity. I still live in that apartment, I still sleep in that bed, and sometimes in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, I hear my name whispered in the darkness. But I don't know if it's real or if it's just the echo of a mind that's learned to create its own monsters. The truth is down there beneath the floorboards that never creak anymore. Or maybe the truth is that there was never anything down there at all. Maybe the real horror is not knowing which version of reality to trust, and realizing that the most terrifying prison is the one we build inside our own minds. I keep the photos on my phone, but I've never shown them to anyone. Who would believe me? And more importantly, who would I be protecting by keeping this secret? The watchers in the basement, or the woman who's slowly losing her grip on what's real? The answer is probably both. Story 10, the new owners believed it was merely a peculiar trait how the old intercom system crackled late at night. A relic from a bygone era, rewired but long abandoned. Then one evening the husband pressed the button out of curiosity. A whisper crackled through the speaker. "Why did you return?" He recoiled, his hands trembling. His wife, standing behind him, murmured, "I never said that." The stately Victorian manor nestled among ancient oak trees, its aged facade concealing the modernized interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker had acquired the estate at an unexpectedly modest price, despite the realtor's uneasy demeanor during the tour. The intercom system, a vintage feature linking all rooms, had captivated the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, gravel crunching under the tires of her unmarked car. The call had come in as a possible break-in, but a hint in the dispatcher's voice hinted at a deeper narrative. The tall figure of Daniel Parker welcomed her at the entrance, his pallor evident even in the dim porch light. It all began with the intercom, he recounted, guiding Detective Reeves through the grand foyer. Initially just static, then whispers, then full sentences. My wife thought I was imagining things until she heard it too. In the living room, Meredith sat stiff on an antique sofa, hands clutching a steaming mug left untouched. "We uncovered something behind the wall," she stated abruptly. Daniel wanted to expand the kitchen pantry, and when he removed the drywall, her voice wavered. Behind the wall, wrapped in decaying plastic, they found a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves donned gloves before delicately opening its fragile pages. The elegant yet frantic handwriting belonged to someone named Alina, the presumed previous owner. The entries chronicled her mounting suspicion that her husband Vincent intended to harm her. The last entry was 30 years old, Daniel elaborated. After that, silence. The former owners mentioned they purchased it from an elderly man who relocated to a retirement community. The investigation revealed that Vincent and Alina Blackwood had indeed owned the house. Records indicated Vincent sold the house shortly after Alina reportedly left him. No divorce was filed, no change of address, no financial activity in Alina's name after the final journal entry. Detective Reeves assembled a team to thoroughly inspect the property. Ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath the concrete foundation of the garden shed. As investigators broke through the aged concrete, the truth emerged in the form of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the skeleton belonged to a woman in her 40s, showing signs of blunt force trauma to the skull. Among the remains, a gold wedding band with an inscription, "To Alina, my eternal love." The case against Vincent Blackwood swiftly took shape. Now elderly and residing in a care facility, his mind grasped the charges brought against him. When confronted with the evidence, his response sent shivers down even the seasoned detective's spine. "She wouldn't cease talking," Vincent said, his voice chillingly calm. "Always prattling through that cursed intercom, checking on me, questioning me. I disconnected it, but she rewired it herself. Claimed she wanted to always be able to reach me, no matter where I was in the house." He gazed ahead, eyes vacant. "I just craved silence." In his confession, Vincent disclosed how he meticulously crafted the tale of Alina deserting him, even sending postcards to neighbors from various locales, penned in forged handwriting. He resided in the house for years after, walking daily over the concrete where his wife lay buried. The trial was brief, with Vincent pleading guilty to murder. The sentencing judge remarked on the calculated nature of the crime and the decades of deceit that ensued. Daniel and Meredith eventually sold the house, unable to stay after uncovering its grim past. Before departing, they held a memorial for Alina in the garden, now renewed post-investigation. The intercom system was removed by the subsequent owners during renovations. Workers reported hearing static and whispers during the removal process, attributing it to interference from their tools. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file one last time before it was archived. As she shut the folder, she pondered how the house itself seemed to reach through time to unveil its secret. The justice system had finally caught up with Vincent Blackwood, all because Alina had found a way to make her voice heard. Among local law enforcement, the case became known as the house that answered back. Detective Reeves would occasionally drive past the property on her way home. She never halted, but she would slow down, window slightly cracked, listening for whispers carried on the wind. Story 11. The river flowed lazily that morning, its surface as smooth as glass, reflecting the soft light of the rising sun. The fisherman, lost in his thoughts, nearly missed the sight of a suitcase bobbing gently near the shore. At first glance, he assumed it was merely a pile of discarded clothes left behind by careless passers-by. But as he approached, a foul odor enveloped him, thick and suffocating. The suitcase was bound in chains, its once sharp edges now dulled by time and exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, they were met with a chilling sight: not clothes, but tangled hair, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and at the bottom a cryptic note that sent shivers down their spines: "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, a handkerchief pressed against her nose to ward off the stench. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s named Catherine Walsh, lay before her, her dark hair now matted and her pale skin marred by the water. The medical examiner worked with precision, cataloging every detail before the body was taken away. But what struck Mercer was not the gruesome condition of the victim, but the eerie care that had been taken with her appearance: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, dressed in expensive attire. She was not just disposed of, Mercer observed, her gaze fixed on the tranquil waters. She was prepared, presented. Walsh, a successful real estate agent known for her expertise in selling high-end properties, lived a seemingly perfect life. Divorced, childless, residing in an affluent neighborhood, she was described by colleagues as ambitious, meticulous, and fiercely private. Her sudden disappearance, reported by her worried assistant, raised red flags. She had vanished on the day of a crucial showing, a deal that promised to be her most lucrative yet. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously organized life, they uncovered a puzzling contradiction. Her home was immaculate, every detail meticulously arranged, but in her office, a drawer slightly ajar revealed a hidden journal. The final entry sent a chill down Mercer's spine. He's watching again, same car, different plates. Further examination of Walsh's digital footprint unveiled a disturbing pattern: countless emails from unknown senders, all bearing the unsettling message, "I see your perfection," sent at precise intervals. Her internet searches hinted at a growing sense of unease, a fear that someone was encroaching on her carefully constructed world. Mercer pieced together the fragments of evidence, the careful staging of the crime scene, the ominous messages, and the victim's escalating paranoia. "Our killer is methodical," she mused to her partner. This was not a crime of passion, this was a ritual. A breakthrough arrived unexpectedly when a local pawnshop owner identified Walsh's missing emerald necklace. The culprit was none other than Michael Linden, a nondescript maintenance worker with a penchant for blending into the background. Surveillance footage captured his repeated visits to Walsh's building, his movements calculated to avoid detection. Inside Linden's humble abode, detectives made a chilling discovery: a shrine dedicated to Walsh and other women, all bearing a striking resemblance to each other. Photographs lined the walls, each woman captured in moments of vulnerability, unaware of the lurking danger. Some images were crossed out in crimson ink. Walsh was just one of many. Hidden behind a false panel in Linden's closet lay a trove of mementos from his victims: a lock of hair, a stained tissue, a set of keys. Each item meticulously catalogued in a small notebook, detailing every aspect of the women's lives. When confronted, Linden remained eerily composed. They were flawed, he confessed, his voice devoid of emotion. They pretended to be perfect, but I saw through their fade. Catherine's desk was always in disarray, her lipstick never quite perfect, her perfection was a lie. The search for the other victims mentioned in Linden's note led investigators to remote locations, where more suitcases surfaced, each containing a woman carefully groomed and dressed, their lives cut short by Linden's twisted quest for perfection. During the trial, Linden sat unmoving, his expression inscrutable as the horrors of his actions were laid bare. He had stalked, studied, and ultimately destroyed these women, convinced that he was purging them of their imperfections. A life sentence was handed down, sealing his fate. For Detective Mercer, the case was closed, but the haunting questions remained. What drove Linden to fixate on these particular women? What inner turmoil led him down this dark path of obsession and violence? As the river continued its unhurried journey downstream, carrying away all traces of the tragedy, Mercer sat at her desk, the chilling notebooks before her. They served as a grim reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, darkness lurks, waiting to surface. The most perilous predators are not always the ones who lurk in the shadows, but those who walk among us, concealed behind masks of normalcy, ready to strike at the slightest hint of imperfection. Story 12. The unmarked package sat on Sarah Miller's doorstep, a mysterious arrival shrouded in secrecy. No return label, no tracking number, just a nondescript cardboard box kissed by the morning dew. It wasn't intended for her, the address matched, but the name was foreign. She hesitated, a fleeting moment where she could have left it untouched, a puzzle unopened. But curiosity, that insatiable whisper in the mind, beckoned her forth. With gentle fingers, she peeled back the tape, anticipating the mundane contents of books or clothes. Instead, a VHS tape lay within, accompanied by a solitary sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, feeling its weight press against her palms, an unexpected heaviness that seemed to carry the weight of secrets untold. Tracing the worn edges, she noted the imperfections in the plastic casing, each one a silent story of its own. The attached note bore the marks of urgency, the penmanship etched with a sense of insistence, as if urging her compliance. Amidst the backdrop of a tranquil suburban neighborhood, with its familiar sounds of life in motion, a distant dog's bark, playful laughter of children, the rhythmic drone of a lawnmower, Sarah found herself transfixed by the enigma within her grasp. Bringing the package inside, she placed it on her kitchen counter, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The name Daniel Whitaker held no significance in her world. Having resided in her home for years, she had never encountered a soul by that name. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had bid farewell, leaving behind memories in the form of kind gestures and neighborly smiles. As Sarah's gaze lingered on her vintage VCR, a relic of bygone days cherished for its nostalgia, the tape called to her, its mystery a siren's song wrapped in black plastic. Against her better judgment, she slid the tape into the machine, the screen initially awash with static that gradually coalesced into focus. A dimly lit room materialized, illuminated by a lone lamp casting long shadows. The camera angle seemed askew, as if hastily positioned, capturing a man seated in a wooden chair, his features obscured by darkness. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man's voice resonated through the speakers, quiet yet unwavering. "If you're watching this, someone has found you, and that means they will find me as well." Leaning forward, he revealed a countenance marked by weariness and vigilance, a face weathered by sleepless nights, stubble adorning his jaw, hair unkempt. "I am innocent," he declared with conviction. "I need you to understand that. They planted evidence against me, my fingerprints, my DNA, despite never having laid a hand on her." As the camera trembled slightly, Daniel adjusted its position, offering glimpses of the stark room's barrenness, bare walls, sparse furnishings, a transitory abode for one prepared to flee at a moment's notice. "They fabricated everything," he continued, the strain evident in his voice. "The official narrative will paint me as the culprit, alleging a prior connection with Catherine Walsh, fabricated altercations, false witness accounts of our disputes. None of it holds truth. I only learned of Catherine's existence upon seeing her tragic fate broadcasted." Detective Eliza Ramirez scrutinized the identical VHS tape resting on her desk, one of several that had surfaced recently. Each tape bore the same urgent plea from Daniel Whitaker, a man embroiled in the shadows of suspicion following Catherine Walsh's murder, an enigma who had vanished into obscurity upon the discovery of her lifeless body. The case had appeared straightforward initially. A young professional, Catherine Walsh, found lifeless in her own home, the evidence pointing unequivocally towards Whitaker, a man with a prior blemish on his record and a suspicious presence near the crime scene. However, as the tapes proliferated, a new narrative began to unfurl. Ramirez voiced her thoughts into the recorder, acknowledging the complexity that Whitaker's recordings introduced. Was he orchestrating an elaborate ruse or unveiling a darker truth obscured from sight? Her investigation delved deeper, traversing the realm of shadows and half-truths that clouded the case. The tide shifted when Ramirez unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblower case against PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical behemoth entangled in a web of deceit. Walsh had stumbled upon discrepancies in their clinical trials, unearthing damning evidence of a cover-up concerning a potent new drug slated for market release. Murmurs of her impending testimony echoed through the halls of power, a revelation that could shake the foundations of the pharmaceutical empire. Strange anomalies began to surface, casting doubt upon the seemingly airtight case against Whitaker. The DNA evidence appeared almost too pristine, meticulously placed in locations incongruent with the crime scene. Witness statements bore rehearsed quality, parroting identical phrases across disparate accounts. Surveillance footage from nearby establishments mysteriously vanished, creating a void in the timeline surrounding the tragic events. Days passed and Sarah Miller found herself in possession of a second package, its contents a trove of incriminating documents, clinical reports, internal communications, email transcripts, all pointing towards the malevolent machinations of PharmaCorp. Catherine Walsh's digital signature adorned each piece of evidence, validating her pursuit of truth in the face of deception. The tapestry of deceit began to unravel, threads of conspiracy weaving a tapestry of corruption. Detective Ramirez, in collaboration with the tape's other recipients, traced Whitaker's breadcrumb trail, piecing together a mosaic of treachery. Whitaker, an IT security specialist for a PharmaCorp subcontractor, had stumbled upon Catherine's digital footprint, a red flag in an ocean of data. They were watching her, Whitaker disclosed in a subsequent recording. I uncovered surveillance directives within the system, indications that they were aware of her investigative endeavors. And then I found myself barred from accessing the network. The subsequent day heralded her demise, and inexplicably I was cast as the villain. The breakthrough arrived when Sarah Miller discerned a crucial detail in her copy of the tape, a reflective glimmer in a window behind Whitaker, revealing a row of storage units. Working in tandem with Ramirez, they pinpointed the location, delving into Unit 217's depths. Within its confines lay the damning evidence. Whitaker's journal chronicling the web of deceit, Catherine's original findings, and damning blueprints for framing Whitaker etched in the handwriting of PharmaCorp's security chief, a former law enforcer with unfettered access to the evidence vault. Justice, a silent sentinel in the shadows, didn't arrive in a blaze of glory, but through the accumulation of irrefutable evidence. 3 corporate titans faced indictment, their fortress of lies crumbling beneath the weight of truth. The security chief capitulated, striking a deal to expose his benefactors. The tainted drug met its demise, withdrawn from the precipice of release. Emerging from the shadows of seclusion, Whitaker bore the scars of his tribulations, a ghost of his former self. The charges against him dissipated like mist in the morning sun, dissipating into the ether. Sarah Miller found herself face to face with the enigmatic figure, their meeting a convergence of happenstance and destiny. "Why me?" she ventured, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. "The algorithm chose you," Whitaker replied, his gaze weary yet resolute. "I sought individuals untethered to my plight, unconnected to Catherine, a beacon of impartiality amidst the storm of falsities." In the quiet of that moment, the accused and the inadvertent ally stood in silent communion, contemplating the fragility of truth in a world veiled by deceit. Sarah, breaking the silence, mused, the wrong address turned out to be the right one. The VHS tapes, vessels of revelation, found a new home in the halls of justice. artifacts of a clandestine odyssey where truth wore a mask of deception, awaiting a curious soul to decipher its cryptic message. Story 13, they discovered it in the attic, concealed beneath a worn-out blanket. A porcelain doll, fragile and aged, with its vivid blue eyes painted wide open, never blinking. It was unfamiliar to both of them. They dismissed it with a laugh, a mere forgotten relic. But that night, as they settled in bed, an unsettling feeling crept in. The air grew heavier, the silence stretched longer. And by morning, the doll had vanished from the attic. It now sat at the foot of their bed. Sarah and Michael, a young couple, had bought the Victorian house at an auction, captivated by its intricate woodwork and enigmatic allure, despite whispers about its troubled past. They were drawn to the tales woven into its walls, unaware they would soon become entwined with them. Detective Rachel Winters received the call on a crisp autumn morning. A woman's lifeless body was discovered in the master bedroom, positioned unnaturally, limbs bent at precise angles, eyes wide open with a frozen expression of terror. In the hallway, the male victim seemed as though he had been trying to flee. The scene was pristine, no forced entry, no signs of struggle beyond the eerie stillness. "The arrangement is intentional," murmured Detective Winters into her recorder as crime scene photographers meticulously documented every detail. The woman appears staged, like a doll plucked from a collection. The investigation commenced with thorough interviews of neighbors. An elderly resident recalled glimpsing a shadow moving behind an upstairs window when the couple should have been away. Another mentioned hearing childlike laughter emanating from the deserted house at night. Each testimony added a layer of unease to the unfolding mystery. Forensic analysis unveiled microscopic fibers scattered throughout the house, antique cotton and silk, akin to materials used for doll attire. The concentration was highest around the victims and the attic. More perplexing was the absence of any foreign fingerprints, DNA traces, or footprints, as if the perpetrator existed beyond the physical realm. Delving into the property's history unveiled a pattern. 3 prior owners had met mysterious ends over 6 decades. Each case remained unresolved, with records hinting at peculiar anomalies. One family reported discovering antique toys in freshly cleaned rooms. Another documented hearing phantom footsteps when the house should have been empty. Detective Winters unearthed an old newspaper clipping from decades past. A renowned doll maker and his daughter had once resided in the house. The child's demise was shrouded in suspicion, and the father, though questioned, was never charged. Before his own tragic end, he crafted a final doll, a perfect replica of his daughter. Strangely, the doll was not listed in the inventory when Sarah and Michael acquired the house. As Detective Winters delved deeper, she discerned a common thread among the victims. All had altered the house, particularly the attic. Sarah and Michael had initiated renovations shortly before their demise, intending to transform the attic into a workspace. A breakthrough emerged from old photographs found beneath the attic floorboards, revealing the doll maker with his creations. One doll stood out an exact match to the one discovered by Sarah and Michael. In the images, the doll appeared to move between shots taken moments apart. Infrared scans unveiled chilling evidence, unseen tiny handprints trailing from the attic to the master bedroom, along with a mysterious residue identified as porcelain dust mixed with unidentifiable organic matter. The investigation took a peculiar turn when Detective Winters interviewed a distant relative of the doll maker. The woman whispered about the doll maker's unconventional practices, infusing human elements into his creations to breathe life into them. She spoke of rituals binding spirits to objects, wisdom the doll maker had gleaned from foreign travels. The perfect dolls, she murmured, were more than mere playthings. Following this revelation, the investigation hit a standstill. No suspects emerged, no logical explanations aligned with the evidence. The case lingered, growing cold. Detective Winters, retaining the doll as evidence, secured it in a locked cabinet at the station. The next morning, the doll and Detective Winters vanished from the locked office. Security footage displayed only static during the missing hours. The house was auctioned once more, its dark history overshadowing its architectural grandeur. The new owners found the attic bare, save for a neatly folded, tattered blanket in a corner. The doll remained elusive, and the deaths of Sarah and Michael joined the roster of unresolved cases occasionally whispered about in the precinct. Rumors circulated of the doll's spectral presence in the evidence storage, though inventory checks yielded no evidence. Detective Winters retired prematurely, citing personal motives. On her final day, she extracted a photograph of the doll maker with his collection from her personal files. Labeling the envelope "Never Open," she safeguarded it. The new owners reported no disturbances, opting to leave the attic undisturbed. Yet on quiet nights, neighbors claimed to catch a fleeting shadow behind the attic window, accompanied by the faint laughter of a child. Story 14. The apartment had sat in silence for months, its emptiness a void waiting to be filled. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, they carried with them no expectations, just a sense of dust settling and the possibility of forgotten furnishings. One door, however, stood resolute in its refusal to yield. It was a closet locked tight from within, guarding its secrets like a sentinel. The landlord, with a troubled brow and hands that perpetually glistened with nervous sweat, finally mustered the courage to force the stubborn door open. Anticipation hung heavy in the air as they braced for the mundane, a collection of old coats, perhaps some discarded knickknacks. But what they discovered within those walls was anything but ordinary. Scratches marred the wooden surface, etched with a fervor that spoke of desperation and confinement. Deep, jagged lines told a silent tale of struggle and fear. And nestled in the corner, a relic of the past, lay dormant a vintage flip phone, its battery long drained of life, save for one unread message that glowed hauntingly on the screen. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the inexplicable, felt a chill creep up her spine at the sight before her. It wasn't the presence of blood or overt violence that unsettled her, but rather the silent screams embedded in those scratch marks, a silent plea for freedom, a harrowing testament to captivity. "We need forensics on site immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured each agonizing scratch with his camera. "And fetch me the records of the previous tenants." The cryptic message on the phone simply stated, "I know what you did." As the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, a narrative of terror and manipulation began to unfold. The landlord recounted the departure of the previous tenant, a young woman named Emma Caldwell, who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid rent and a shroud of mystery. Forensic analysis revealed a chilling truth: blood samples embedded in the scratches, most belonging to Emma herself. But there were others, two distinct DNA profiles that defied logic. One remained a mystery, the other a man who had supposedly perished years ago in a tragic accident. Shaw's mind whirled with questions as she delved deeper into Emma's life. A meticulously kept apartment, a sudden cessation of contact with loved ones, and a haunting trail of calls from an unknown number, all signs pointing to a sinister presence lurking in the shadows. The unraveling of the mystery led Shaw down a dark path, intertwining the fates of Emma and another missing woman, Lynette Porter. Surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and a web of connections painted a grim picture of a man consumed by his twisted desires. Derek Mercer, the mastermind behind the elaborate charade, had orchestrated a macabre dance of control and torment. His victims, trapped in confined spaces, bore witness to his depravity and thirst for dominance. As the investigation unfolded, Mercer's facade crumbled, revealing a monster hidden in plain sight. His capture, a fleeting victory in the face of unspeakable horrors, brought a sliver of justice to the victims and closure to those haunted by his deeds. The trial laid bare Mercer's intricate web of deceit, his cold manipulation of lives intertwined in a tapestry of fear and suffering. Emma's fate, sealed within the confines of that closet, echoed through the courtroom, a silent scream for justice that reverberated with each guilty verdict. In the aftermath, as the gavel fell and Mercer's fate was sealed, a sense of closure washed over the room. Lynette Porter, a survivor of Mercer's twisted games, stood tall in the face of darkness, her words a beacon of resilience and defiance. The legacy of Emma's apartment lived on in the form of a mounted closet door in Detective Shaw's office, a poignant reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring strength found in the most harrowing of circumstances. And as the night whispered its lullaby of secrets and shadows, the echoes of a dark chapter faded into the gentle murmur of dreams, beckoning the listener to slumber in the embrace of quietude and peace. Story 15, The Enigmatic Victorian. She crossed the threshold, the dust dancing in the stillness of the abandoned Victorian. Years of neglect had left the walls peeling, the furniture draped in ghostly sheets. Each step she took felt like entering a frozen moment in time, a place where the past lingered heavily in the air. But amidst the quiet decay, there was a peculiar mystery that defied explanation. Doors, countless doors, scattered throughout the house. Yet no matter which one she opened, each pathway led her back to the same room, the parlor. A strange sensation crept over her as she wandered the corridors, a feeling of being trapped in a labyrinth with no escape. And when she tried to retrace her steps, the front door had vanished, leaving her stranded in this maze of forgotten memories. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless body transformed the once forgotten Victorian into a haunting crime scene, shrouded in darkness and secrets. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the entrance, observing the forensic team moving like silent specters through the dimly lit rooms. This house, known for its unsettling reputation among the locals, now held secrets far more sinister than mere urban legends. The initial examination suggests she passed approximately 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his words barely audible in the heavy silence. The cause of death appears to be asphyxiation. Morgan's body had been discovered in the parlor, seated in an antique chair as if awaiting a visitor, her expression peaceful, hands folded neatly in her lap. No signs of struggle, no evidence of a fight for survival. The scene exuded a chilling stillness that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. Lind inquired who discovered the body. Her partner responded. A real estate agent showing the property stumbled upon her, mistaking her for an intruder until they drew closer. The house had remained vacant since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly half a decade ago, engulfed in legal disputes and fading from memory save for the occasional trespasser seeking thrills. Morgan Pierce, a 26-year-old graduate student with a passion for unraveling architectural enigmas, had been drawn to the Victorian's mysterious allure. Her friends described her as meticulous, driven, and captivated by spaces that defied traditional design principles. The abandoned Victorian, with its reputation for disorienting those who dared to enter, had beckoned to her curiosity like a siren's call. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days prior, Lind noted, flipping through her notes. Morgan mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her research. As the investigation unfolded, it unveiled Morgan's frequent visits to the house in the weeks leading up to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled peculiar acoustic phenomena, sudden drops in temperature, and doors that seemed to lead to different destinations with each opening. In her final journal entry, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to capture what she cryptically referred to as spatial inconsistencies. Yet, this equipment was nowhere to be found at the scene. The autopsy yielded an unexpected revelation: traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, a substance derived from a plant used in shamanic rituals. While known to induce disorientation and vivid hallucinations, the quantities found were insufficient to be lethal. Morgan wasn't one to engage in recreational drug use, her boyfriend affirmed during questioning. She was devoted to her research and wouldn't have jeopardized her perception willingly. Through digital forensics, fragments of deleted messages from Morgan's phone emerged, exchanges with a kindred spirit who shared her fascination with the enigmatic house, someone claiming to grasp its hidden truths. The conversations evolved into an intimate and enigmatic exchange of words, hinting at a deeper connection to the house's mysteries. The house retains its memories, one message revealed. It yearns for someone to understand. The investigation led Lynn to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian whose expertise in rare spatial anomalies had captivated Morgan's attention. Their professional rapport had blossomed into a more personal bond, fueled by a mutual quest for the truth lurking within the Victorian's walls. When questioned, Reeves expressed genuine sorrow at Morgan's untimely passing. "The house has a reputation," he shared. Its original architect wove optical illusions and deceptive perspectives into its design, aiming to bewilder and confound. Morgan believed there was a deeper layer to it, beyond mere architectural tricks. However, Reeves possessed a solid alibi for the presumed time of Morgan's demise, supported by security footage of him lecturing at a university symposium miles away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: the grandson of a leaner Blackwood residing overseas. Contacted by the investigators, he divulged a long-concealed family secret. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to meet their end in that house," he disclosed. "There were others. Always discovered in the parlor, always appearing serene. The family termed it the claiming." Handing over decades-old journals, he unveiled a legacy of deaths initially attributed to natural causes, a pattern of individuals succumbing to what the family cryptically dubbed the influence after prolonged stays in the house. A secondary search of the property unearthed a concealed compartment behind the parlor's fireplace. Within lay Morgan's missing equipment, alongside a cryptic arrangement of artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, meticulously placed in a geometric formation. At the heart of this assembly rested a weathered figurine, embodying a deity associated with liminal spaces, those thresholds bridging realms. Analysis of the artifacts linked their residue to the alkaloid detected in Morgan's system, deepening the enigma shrouding her demise. The investigation took a chilling turn as forensic analysis of dust patterns within the house unveiled the presence of an unidentified individual during Morgan's final hours. Partial fingerprints, distinct from Morgan's or any known visitor, adorned the doorknobs throughout the labyrinthine home. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was found lifeless in his apartment, mirroring Morgan's serene posture, with the same alkaloid coursing through his veins. Clutched in his hand was a key that defied placement within his residence, but seamlessly unlocked the hidden compartment in the Victorian. His last written words, sent to himself in a peculiar act of preservation, echoed a haunting truth. The house doesn't ensnare you physically, it ensnares your perception. Morgan was correct, the doors lead to where they always have, yet a subtle force deceives you into a cyclical path. Once you grasp the verity, departure is within reach. Alas, by then the desire to leave has vanished. The case lingered as an open investigation, marked by suspicious deaths shrouded in enigmas and shadows. The Victorian, now condemned and cordoned off by authorities, whispered tales of spectral lights flickering on moonlit nights and of visitors who ventured in but never emerged. Local whispers diverged. Some claimed the house seized those who delved too deeply into its secrets, while others posited that Morgan and Reeves had unearthed a primordial and potent force, one existing between the seams of conventional reality. The truth, akin to an elusive exit in a house where all doors led back to the beginning, remained veiled in mystery, concealed within the confines of a place where time stood still and history spoke in whispers. Story 16. She always avoided the attic, finding it unsettling, but when a storm brought a leak in the roof, she had no choice but to venture up there. The attic was a realm of forgotten treasures blanketed in dust and cobwebs. Amidst the shadows, tucked away in the far corner, rested an ancient dollhouse, intricately detailed with miniature furniture meticulously arranged. Yet, as she gazed into its tiny rooms, a sense of unease crept over her. The figures within were not mere dolls, but intricately hand-carved replicas of her own family. Each tiny figure placed exactly where their living counterparts sat downstairs, mirroring their every detail, except for one. The figure meant to represent her stood by the attic door, watching. Rebecca Morgan traced her finger along the dollhouse's roof, feeling the indent where the miniature version of herself stood. A shiver ran down her spine, unrelated to the chill in the air whispering through the rafters. The dollhouse had no place in this home. It wasn't her childhood's sanctuary, but a rented abode the family had recently inhabited. The unsettling discovery prompted Rebecca to contact the authorities in a panic. Law enforcement officers arrived at the suburban residence to find a traumatized family gathered in the living room, refusing to return upstairs. Initially dismissing the situation as an elaborate hoax or the product of an imaginative mind adjusting to a new environment, lead investigator Detective Sarah Harmon was soon struck by the intricate details of the miniature figures. It was the level of detail that caught my attention, Detective Harmon later recounted. Each tiny figurine captured a distinct trait of every family member: the father's thinning hair, the son's favorite hoodie, even the small birthmark on the mother's hand. The investigation took a dark turn when forensic teams uncovered fingerprints on the dollhouse that did not match any family member. Even more disturbing were the microscopic cameras hidden in the eyes of each miniature figure, all linked to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse. Analysis of the Morgan family's movements revealed a chilling revelation. The positions of the miniature figures did not merely replicate the family's seating arrangement on that fateful evening, but mirrored their actions on different days, suggesting a prolonged period of observation to learn their routines. We soon realized this was no ordinary case of stalking, Detective Harmon explained. The perpetrator displayed an unprecedented level of obsession rarely seen in criminal psychology. Further exploration of the premises revealed a concealed entrance to a hidden basement, camouflaged behind a false wall in the pantry. Inside, investigators uncovered evidence of someone's clandestine residence predating the Morgan family's tenancy. Discarded food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at an intruder who had been dwelling beneath the unsuspecting family for weeks. The absence of forced entry puzzled investigators, as property records indicated the house had remained vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans moved in. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had passed away within a short span, leaving their son in charge of selling the property and leasing it out. Neighborhood interviews yielded little insight, with most residents claiming no knowledge of anything amiss. However, an elderly woman mentioned sporadic lights in the house during its unoccupied period, assuming them to be real estate agents showcasing the property. "I never imagined someone might be residing there without permission," she told investigators. A breakthrough emerged through digital forensics. Examination of the surveillance system linked to the miniature cameras traced the data to an external server with an IP address leading to a small apartment across town. Inside, walls adorned with photographs of the Morgan family and previous occupants of the house painted a disturbing picture. Detailed journal entries chronicled the daily lives of each family member with unsettling accuracy. Most chilling of all was the discovery of a workshop filled with partially completed dollhouses, each representing a different household in the vicinity. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the deceased homeowners, whose financial records revealed mounting debts following his parents' demise. Rather than selling the property outright, he had fashioned a covert living space within, staying hidden while collecting rent from unsuspecting tenants. The dollhouse served as his command center, elaborated the forensic psychologist involved in the case. Each miniature figure symbolized someone under his watchful eye. Rebecca's figure near the attic door wasn't a threat, but his acknowledgement of her uncovering his surveillance scheme. During interrogation, Wells remained chillingly composed as he elucidated his motives. "They were inhabiting my childhood home, sleeping in my parents' bedroom. I needed assurance they respected it." When probed about the positioned figures, his response was simple: "I wanted them to understand I was always watching." Psychological evaluation unraveled a convoluted tale of possessive delusion. Unable to cope with losing his childhood abode, Wells crafted an elaborate system to retain dominion over it. The dollhouse symbolized his ownership of both the property and its occupants. The Morgan family never returned to that house. Rebecca later reflected on the most haunting aspect not being the dollhouse's discovery, but its implications. "We were under surveillance all this time, our lives measured, molded into playthings. The true terror lay not in the dollhouse itself, but in realizing we were mere pawns in his orchestrated game of observation and control." Wells faced multiple charges including stalking, invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and breaking and entering. The case prompted a reevaluation of real estate disclosure regulations concerning deaths on properties and agents' responsibilities in ensuring proper vacating procedures before new tenants move in. During sentencing, the judge highlighted the egregious violation endured by the Morgan family. "You didn't just intrude into their home, you violated their sense of security and independence. You observed their most intimate moments, recreating them for your gratification." What unsettles criminologists about this case is how long Wells could have operated unnoticed if not for Rebecca's discovery of the dollhouse. Analysis of his journals suggested he had covertly resided within various homes for almost 2 years, crafting miniature replicas of each family under his surveillance. The Morgan family eventually relocated far away, but in her victim impact statements, Rebecca confessed to habitual checks of closets and crawl spaces. She rid their new home of all dollhouses and miniatures, acknowledging, Sometimes I still sense eyes on me, wondering if someone is manipulating a tiny version of myself in a dollhouse undiscovered. The narrative of Martin Wells serves as a cautionary tale, showcasing the depths of obsession and the manipulation of trust. It underscores the importance of vigilance and safeguards against unseen threats lurking within the familiar facade of home. Each creak of a floorboard, every flicker of shadow, may conceal a world of secrets waiting to be unveiled. So as you drift into slumber, remember to cherish the sanctuary of your dreams, for reality may hold mysteries darker than the night itself. Story 17. In the stillness of the night, a mysterious parcel arrived, nestled within an unassuming envelope devoid of any sender's mark. Inside, a solitary brass key weathered by the hands of time. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, held it in her palm, a sense of déjà vu lingering in the air. Though unfamiliar, the key whispered a haunting familiarity to her soul. With a gentle slide into every lock she possessed, the key remained obstinately still, refusing to yield to her touch. It belonged to no door in her abode. Perplexed, she set it upon the coffee table, where the ancient grandfather clock, long silent, released a solitary, eerie chime into the hushed hallway. Sarah's unease grew, a nagging feeling urging her to seek the counsel of authorities. The responding officer, a skeptic at heart, brushed off her concerns as a trivial mishap, just a key in the mail, easily dismissed. But Sarah's intuition, a quiet whisper of alarm, would not be quelled. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, a gesture to appease Sarah's growing disquiet. Little did he know that this seemingly innocuous object would unravel a web of darkness that lurked beneath the tranquil façade of their suburban neighborhood. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a knack for unraveling enigmas, inherited the case file. The brass key sat upon his desk, unassuming yet unsettling, beckoning him into a realm of shadows and secrets. Background checks revealed Sarah's innocence, her life an open book with no chapter of malice penned within its pages. The key bore no fingerprints but hers, its origins shrouded in mystery. The trail seemed cold until a breakthrough emerged, casting a sinister light upon the key's cryptic presence. A database search unveiled a chilling connection, a key, identical in its unique pattern, linked to a long-forgotten cold case. A storage unit, once a chamber of unspeakable horrors, bore the same mark, a key to a chamber of nightmares. As the investigation deepened, the specter of a predator long thought vanished loomed once more. Harold Jenkins, a shadow in the night, emerged from the shadows of memory. A man of obscurity, his silent footsteps left no trace, his past a canvas of darkness waiting to be unveiled. The hunt for Jenkins intensified, each step unearthing a new layer of dread. Behind a decrepit cabin, a chamber of horrors lay concealed, a shrine to unspeakable acts. Keys adorned with names and dates whispered of lives lost, of souls stolen in the dead of night. The manhunt cascaded into a crescendo of fear and desperation. Jenkins, a ghost in the wilderness, a phantom of depravity, eluded capture until the final reckoning in the shadow of an abandoned tower. As the tower's walls echoed with the silence of the fallen, Jenkins' lifeless form spoke volumes through a journal of atrocities, a confession of sins etched in ink. His legacy, a testament to the darkness within, a reminder of the monsters that dwell among us. The keys, silent witnesses to a symphony of sorrow, now rest in an evidence locker, their secrets locked away. Sarah, forever changed by the brush of evil, walks a path haunted by shadows of what could have been. The grandfather clock, once a harbinger of foreboding, now stands silent, its chime a memory of a time when darkness walked the halls unseen. And in the quiet of the night, the keys remain, guardians of a truth too terrible to unlock, a reminder of the fragility of the ordinary in the face of the extraordinary. Story 18. In the quiet of the night, a worn envelope made its way into the hands of Detective Sarah Morgan. Its edges whispered of age, while the stamp bore the freshness of recent days. With a careful touch, she unfolded its secrets. A single sheet of paper awaited her, bearing a message in a hurried, uneven script. "I am sorry for what I did." As the detective's gloved fingers embraced the paper, a dampness lingered, carrying the faint scent of iron. A reddish smear along the bottom edge caught her attention, not ink, but something more sinister. Into an evidence bag it went, the letter now a piece of a haunting puzzle. The forensics team confirmed her suspicions. The reddish stain, a trace of human blood, whispered of a past unsolved. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had met a tragic fate in her own home, her life extinguished by multiple stab wounds. Her unfinished story lingered in the air, a tale left untold. Years had passed, the case growing cold despite the relentless pursuit of truth. And then, a whisper from the shadows, a letter, simple yet laden with secrets, arriving at the precinct's doorstep. Addressed to the Homicide Division, its presence reignited a flame long thought extinguished. Few fingerprints graced the paper and envelope, only ghostly smudges hinting at a careful hand. The postmark, a breadcrumb leading into the darkness of the unknown, beckoned the team to gather once more, to face the shadows head-on. In the dim light of the briefing room, Detective Morgan unveiled the letter, a beacon of hope in a sea of uncertainty. "This changes everything," she murmured, the weight of the words hanging heavy in the air. A killer's remorse, a glimmer of truth in a web of deception. Her partner, Detective James Chen, offered a different perspective, a shadow of doubt cast upon the letter's sincerity. Was it remorse or a cruel game of manipulation, a dance of shadows in the night? The typewriter's unique imprint patterns led the team down a path of antiquity, a relic from a bygone era with a tale yet to be told. They delved into Rebecca's life, her pursuit of truth a beacon in the darkness of corruption. A second letter arrived, echoing the first in its cryptic message. The truth began to unravel, threads leading to a mansion steeped in shadows and secrets. The eldest son, Richard, bore the weight of suspicion, his polished facade cracking under the pressure of truth. And then a revelation, a hidden room, a collection of damning evidence pointing to a truth long buried. The echoes of a crime long forgotten resounded through the halls of justice, a tale of greed and betrayal woven into the fabric of time. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the truth emerged from the shadows, a recording unveiling the sinister pact between two souls bound by guilt and deceit. Richard's fall from grace was swift, his protestations falling upon deaf ears. In the quiet aftermath, Detective Morgan stood before Rebecca's parents, offering a silent solace in the face of unspeakable loss. The weight of justice hung heavy in the air, a bittersweet victory in a sea of shadows. The blood-stained letters, now relics of a past best forgotten, whispered a tale of caution to those who dared dance with darkness. In the stillness of the night, the echoes of Rebecca Warren's story lingered, a reminder that even the darkest secrets can be brought to light by the gentle touch of remorse. Story 19. The aged Polaroid held memories long faded, capturing a birthday lost to time. Among the smiles and flickering candles, nothing seemed out of place. Yet when the daughter inherited the box of forgotten photographs, she noticed it. A figure lurking in the background just beyond the group, a man shrouded in darkness lingering at the edge of the candlelight. He was not part of the family, a phantom presence unnoticed by all. With each passing photo, he drew closer. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the collection while sorting through her mother's attic following the somber funeral. A simple cardboard box marked memories unveiled a trove of bygone moments from her childhood. What should have brought solace morphed into the genesis of a chilling ordeal. In the initial photo, he was a mere shadow, a silhouette on the periphery during her 7th birthday celebration. The mysterious figure loomed near the glass door, an enigmatic presence observing. In the subsequent snapshot, he had advanced indoors. By the third, he stood ominously behind her uncle, unnoticed by the revelers frozen in time. Trembling, Sarah reached out to her father, seeking answers. "Dad, who is the man haunting these pictures?" A moment of silence preceded a sharp inhalation. "What man? Only family should be there," her father replied, his voice uneasy. Digital copies of the Polaroids were swiftly dispatched to him. His subsequent call revealed a rare tremor in his tone. "This can't be real. We would have noticed a stranger." Detective Marcus Reed attentively surveyed the array of photographs sprawled across his precinct desk as rain tapped rhythmically against the window panes, casting ethereal shadows. His experienced hands traversed the images methodically, scrutinizing each detail. "No one recognized this individual," he inquired, a blend of neutrality and intrigue in his voice. "No one," Sarah affirmed. As she meticulously arranged the photos in chronological order, a revelation dawned on the detective. The phantom figure's deliberate progression through the party, inching closer to the children in each frame, unfurled a disquieting narrative. In the final picture, he loomed directly behind Sarah's youthful self, a pallid hand extending towards her shoulder, just beyond the frame's edge. The photographer, Reed hypothesized, though doubt lingered. "My mother took these. She set the timer and joined the group," Sarah clarified. Copies were made, a case file opened. Interviews with surviving party attendees yielded no recollections of the enigmatic man. No hired help, no casual visitors, just a secluded countryside rental chosen for its privacy. Facial recognition software faltered, the figure strategically obscured in every shot, as if cognizant of the camera's gaze. Yet his posture exuded a practiced intent, a chilling precision. The investigation teetered on the brink until Sarah unearthed additional photos from disparate family gatherings and years. The enigmatic figure persisted, a recurring specter lingering on the fringes, evading notice in the moment. A digital wizardry expert unveiled obscure details: a wrist scar, a distinctive ring, a partial facial reflection previously veiled by shadows. The breakthrough emerged from dental records, linking the phantom to Robert Keller, a vanished maintenance worker implicated in long-dormant child abduction cases spanning the region. Cases that had puzzled investigators for decades, cases that coincided with the documented gatherings. Keller had access to rental properties, including the site of Sarah's birthday festivity, through his employment. The findings unearthed small artifacts beneath the foundation of his former abode: a hair clip matching a missing girl's description, a toy car belonging to a vanished boy, a bracelet that bore Sarah's childhood memory. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the unsettling photos, Sarah received a call from the detective confirming the identification of remains near one of the rental properties. DNA corroborated the tragic truth. It was one of the missing children. Gazing at the final birthday photo, the warm candlelight bathed her family's frozen, jubilant faces. And there, behind her youthful self, barely discernible in the shadows, yet undeniably present, loomed the enigmatic figure, patient, calculating, invisible to all in that moment of bliss. The revelation intertwined unsolved mysteries spanning decades, offering closure to bereaved families but not the solace they sought. The shadow within the family album had stepped into the realm of justice, his presence acknowledged after years of concealment in plain sight. Sarah tenderly gathered the photos, returning them to their box. They bore witness to the unseen dangers lurking in captured moments, elusive figures that navigated through celebrations unnoticed, leaving behind mere whispers of their passage in the frozen frames of time. Story 20. In the quiet stillness of an empty house, a phone sat on the dusty kitchen counter, its screen softly glowing. The call had come from within these walls, a call that shouldn't have been possible. Detective Morgan Reed found herself drawn to this mystery, her mind restless with questions that lingered like whispers in the night. The voice on the other end had been haunting, a desperate plea shrouded in fear and impossibility. It belonged to Catherine Sullivan, a woman long gone from this world, her presence now a mere echo in the abandoned silence. The walls held memories of a family torn apart by tragedy, their story woven into the very fabric of the house they once called home. As Morgan delved deeper into the case, she uncovered a journal that revealed a chilling truth. Catherine's words spoke of a relationship turned sinister, of control and manipulation that led to her untimely demise. The journal became a roadmap to the darkness that had consumed her, a darkness personified in the form of Mark Jennings, her once lover turned tormentor. Mark's facade crumbled under the weight of evidence, his lies exposed in the harsh light of truth. The buried phone unearthed a tale of betrayal and violence, of a life cut short by the hands of someone she once trusted. The call from beyond the grave was not a ghostly visitation, but a cruel manipulation designed to deceive and distort reality. As the investigation unfolded, more victims emerged, each one a tragic chapter in Mark's twisted game. But justice, relentless in its pursuit, finally caught up with him. The courtroom echoed with the weight of Catherine's words, her journal a silent witness to the horrors she endured. In the end, it was not the supernatural that brought Mark to justice, but the courage of a woman who refused to be silenced. Catherine's story lives on, a testament to the resilience of those who have been wronged, a reminder that even in death their voices will find a way to be heard. And in the stillness of that abandoned house where shadows dance and memories linger, the phone remains silent, a relic of a past that will never be forgotten. Story 21. The Unseen Whispers. In the quiet anticipation of a new life, she felt the urge to refresh the nursery, to paint over the faded blue that whispered silent stories of days long past. As the white paint swept across the walls, a hidden message emerged, almost imperceptible at first, then stark and clear. Don't let it hear you. A shiver danced down her spine as she stumbled back, her gaze drawn to tiny handprints etched in the fresh paint, too high for any child's reach. The Morgan residence, once a place of dreams, now harbored a secret that would unravel into the Whispering House case. A young couple, lured by a bargain price, found themselves entangled in a web of mystery and dread. Detective Sarah Klein, with solemn determination, arrived at the doorstep, her notebook a silent witness to the unfolding enigma. The pregnant woman, wearied by restless nights and unsettling discoveries, recounted the abrupt departure of the previous owners, leaving behind only whispers of fear and unanswered questions. The detective, guided by intuition, stepped into the shadows of the historic home, where echoes of the past lingered in the creaking floorboards and the ghostly presence of unfinished paint. In the nursery, the cryptic message lingered, a warning from a bygone era seeping through the layers of time. Beside it, handprints frozen in eternity, a chilling testament to unseen forces at play. Detective Klein delved into the history of the property, unearthing a trail of transient occupants and unsettling reports of children haunted by invisible eyes. The specter of a leaner Blackwood loomed large, a figure from the shadows of the past with a sinister legacy. Her orphanage, a facade for unspeakable deeds, held the key to the vanished children and the lingering whispers in the walls. Piece by piece, the puzzle unraveled, revealing a tale of darkness and desperation. With unwavering resolve, the detective unearthed the hidden truth buried beneath the basement floor, where the lost souls of the orphans found their final rest. Names engraved on pendants told a story of innocence betrayed, of lives cut short by a woman consumed by her twisted desires. In the glow of luminol, the nursery walls bore witness to the children's silent screams, a chorus of handprints reaching out from beyond the grave. Eliner's journals spoke of her macabre experiments, a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. As the case closed, the house stood empty, a silent sentinel to the horrors that lay within its walls. The pregnant couple, wise to the unseen forces that lingered, turned away, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and unanswered questions. Detective Klein, haunted by the echoes of the past, preserved a memento of the case, a photograph of luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a poignant reminder that some secrets are never truly buried, their whispers echoing through the ages. Story 22, The Enigmatic Reflection. She gently swept away the mist on the mirror, peering at her own reflection. Everything appeared normal, her features in place, her attire unchanged. Yet an unsettling feeling crept in as she gazed longer. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a movement not her own. When she turned away, her reflection remained unmoving, observing her every move. This was the moment that marked the beginning of Rebecca Thorne's eerie journey. Rebecca resided in a modest apartment nestled in a serene suburban enclave, leading a solitary existence. Known for her meticulous nature and reserved demeanor, she maintained a cordial relationship with her neighbors while keeping mostly to herself. Her occupation as a data analyst for a mid-sized firm dictated her life, governed by routines and precision. No one could have predicted that she would soon find herself at the heart of a perplexing enigma that would linger in the community for years to come. Initially, peculiar incidents seemed insignificant. Objects in her home shifted inexplicably, nothing stolen, just rearranged. A coffee mug placed on a different shelf, books shuffled around, her toothbrush out of place. She attributed these anomalies to fatigue-induced lapses from hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights. Detective Marion Shaw was assigned to Rebecca's case after she finally reached out to authorities following weeks of disturbances. The initial assessment leaned towards mental health concerns rather than criminal activities, given the absence of concrete evidence, no forced entry, no missing items, just a sense of unease pervading her living space. The pivotal moment arrived with the incident in the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca vividly recounted how her reflection seemed to move independently, a disconcerting sensation of being under constant scrutiny, even in solitude. This time, she had proof a security camera trained on her front door. The footage unearthed a chilling revelation that sent shivers down the spines of seasoned officers. The grainy video captured Rebecca leaving for work in the morning, only to reveal a doppelganger using a key to access her apartment 20 minutes later. Forensic scrutiny confirmed no signs of tampering or digital manipulation. The imposter mirrored Rebecca flawlessly, down to the minutest detail, carrying her distinctive leather bag. Yet Rebecca was already verified at her workplace across town at the time. "We're facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "Someone who has meticulously studied Miss Thorne and can replicate her with uncanny precision." The investigation delved deeper, with fingerprints solely matching Rebecca's and no foreign DNA traces found. Neighbors reported nothing amiss, merely witnessing Rebecca's routine comings and goings. Rebecca's journal chronicled the escalating disturbances, items vanishing, unexplained food consumption, unauthorized computer searches, and unsettling selfies on her phone. She confided in Detective Shaw during their meetings, expressing a growing sense of delusion or manipulation orchestrated to undermine her sanity. Breakthrough arrived when a pattern emerged in the surveillance footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated during Rebecca's scheduled departures for specific engagements, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday grocery runs. It became evident that someone intimately familiar with her routines orchestrated the intrusion with precision. A forensic psychologist hypothesized a fixation case where the culprit fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, possibly aiming to supplant her entirely. Investigation focused on a former co-worker, Lily Winters, who had displayed erratic behavior and an obsession with similarities between herself and Rebecca. Upon searching Lily's abode, investigators uncovered a chilling replica of Rebecca's living space, adorned with hundreds of clandestine photographs capturing Rebecca's every move. The closet housed duplicates of Rebecca's wardrobe, alongside meticulous notes on her behaviors and habits. Video recordings showcased Lily's attempts to emulate Rebecca's mannerisms, evolving from clumsy imitations to near-perfect replications. "She desired to become me," whispered Rebecca upon viewing the evidence. "She wasn't just mimicking me, she was erasing me." Intricate tools for key duplication and electronic access card forging hinted at Lily's elaborate surveillance and infiltration strategies. However, Lily had disappeared by the time authorities moved to apprehend her, leaving behind cryptic journal entries hinting at a chilling resolution. Rebecca was relocated to a secure facility under continuous vigilance, while every facet of her former life underwent scrutiny. However, a disconcerting revelation emerged when security footage depicted someone resembling Rebecca accessing her former workplace and rifling through her files despite her secure seclusion. The realization dawned Lily had seized the opportunity to assume Rebecca's identity, seamlessly blending into her existence while the real Rebecca remained concealed. Lily's whereabouts remain unknown, and Rebecca opted to forge a new identity in a concealed refuge. Detective Shaw kept a photograph on her desk, a juxtaposition of two strikingly similar women, Rebecca and Lily, illustrating the thin line between imitation and identity theft. As Shaw often imparted to her prot-GS, the true terror lies not in resembling another, but in coveting their essence to the extent of self-erasure. Identity, she emphasized, isn't merely external presentation, but a precious essence safeguarded at all costs, only truly cherished when threatened by malevolent intent. Story 23. The tale begins at a costume emporium on the brink of closure, where old treasures were being sold off to new owners. Amidst the relics of forgotten characters, a woman discovered a mask resting upon a dusty shelf. Its intricate features exuded an eerie, almost lifelike quality that captivated her gaze. As she placed it upon the checkout counter, the cashier hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "That mask doesn't belong here," he murmured cryptically. Perplexed, the woman inspected the mask, only to find it devoid of any identifying tag. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to bring it home with her. That very night, a soft whisper of fabric roused her from slumber. Her heart quickened as she realized the mask was no longer where she had left it on the dresser. Instead, it now perched ominously on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her with an unsettling intensity. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, was later discovered by her concerned neighbor. The front door stood ajar, allowing hesitant rays of morning light to pierce the darkness within. What awaited the neighbor was a chilling scene that would perplex investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mysterious mask nowhere to be found. Detective Morgan arrived at the scene as forensics meticulously documented every detail. The rhythmic clicks of the camera shutters echoed through the somber room, blending with the hushed murmurs of the investigative team. An officer jotted down observations in his notepad, noting the absence of forced entry. The detective's keen eyes scanned the room, absorbing every subtle nuance. A partially open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass on the nightstand, mundane details that now held a sinister air, with Catherine's lifeless form as the centerpiece. The medical examiner approached Catherine's body, his expression grave as he noted the absence of visible wounds or signs of struggle. The cause of death eludes initial examination, he somberly declared. Gesturing towards her face, he pointed out the frozen mask of terror etched upon her features. The detective knelt closer, murmuring softly. Something scared her to her very core. Catherine, a reserved art appraiser known for her meticulous eye for authenticity, had led a quiet life. Colleagues praised her ability to discern even the subtlest of discrepancies, a skill that set her apart in her field. Could this very talent have inadvertently led to her untimely demise? Footage from the costume shop shed a peculiar light on the mystery. The cashier's baffled reaction to the mask was evident, prompting a closer examination. The shop owner, when summoned, adamantly denied any knowledge of the mask's origin, deepening the enigma surrounding its presence. A breakthrough emerged when forensics discovered microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's fingertips. These fibers, an enigmatic blend of human hair and unidentified organic material, hinted at a sinister struggle that defied conventional explanation. Further investigations unveiled a series of similar deaths spanning decades, each victim linked by the acquisition of an enigmatic mask and a shared expression of unbridled fear. A retired detective, a veteran of a related case, divulged a startling revelation during a clandestine meeting. Inside each mask, concealed behind the inner lining, were ancient symbols hinting at a ritual involving the transference of souls. The shadows of the past loomed ominously over the present, weaving a tapestry of dread and ancient malevolence. A journal clandestinely stashed in Catherine's apartment unveiled her descent into paranoia as she unraveled the mask's cryptic origins. Her frantic entries chronicled the mask's malevolent sentience, its insidious presence lurking within the shadows of her home. The chilling realization dawned upon her that the mask was more than a mere artifact. It was a harbinger of doom, a vessel seeking a new host to perpetuate its cycle of terror. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place as the detective connected the dots, the enigmatic fibers, Catherine's research, and the pattern of inexplicable deaths. The cause of Catherine's demise was finally ascertained, a fatal cardiac arrest induced by sheer terror, a terror so profound that it defied rational explanation. However, the mystery took a harrowing turn when surveillance footage captured a figure, shrouded in darkness, leaving Catherine's residence wearing a mask that mirrored her visage. A mechanical mimicry of her movements hinted at a sinister force at play, a force that transcended mortal comprehension. Despite a fervent search for the elusive mask, it remained tantalizingly out of reach until reports surfaced of its reappearance in a distant vintage shop months later. By the time authorities arrived, the mask had vanished once more, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and unspeakable dread. The case, shrouded in enigma, remains unresolved to this day. The detective, haunted by Catherine's fate, keeps her journal as a grim memento, a testament to a truth too bizarre for official records. In the stillness of the night, she awakens to a sense of foreboding, a whisper of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. She fortifies her defenses, knowing that the malevolent mask, a harbinger of terror and death, awaits its next unwitting victim, perpetuating a cycle of horror that spans the ages. The mask bides its time, patient and insatiable, hungering for the essence that dwells behind mortal eyes. Story 24, The Hidden Observer. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints didn't account for one either. Yet, as the family peeled back the old carpet, a door emerged from beneath, its handle rusted and heavy. It took 3 of them to pry it open, unleashing a rush of stale air thick with the scent of damp earth. Steps descended into darkness, promising storage but revealing a different reality. A solitary chair occupied the small basement, a lone light bulb swaying above it, and on the wall behind, a row of photographs capturing moments from their own lives. The Mercer family had embraced the suburban property in winter's early darkness, its character and history beckoning them in. Little did they know the depths of history lurking within the walls, ready to collide violently with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene, the crime unit already at work securing the perimeter with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's tremulous voice had relayed the unsettling discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before anyone else descends," Connors directed, gloving her hands with practiced efficiency. Camera flashes punctuated the stairwell as the team captured the eerie scene. The basement was compact, akin to a standard bedroom, with gray concrete walls. A single chair stood anchored in the room's center, bathed in harsh light from above, casting ominous shadows. Yet it was the wall of photographs that held the mystery, 37 images meticulously arranged in chronological order. "These date back weeks," noted Connor's partner, scrutinizing the time-stamped prints. "Look here, Mrs. Mercer asleep, Mr. Mercer at the table, the kids in their rooms. No signs of forced entry, no stolen items, only a breach of privacy, shattering the family's sense of security." Forensics uncovered multiple fingerprints, mostly belonging to previous homeowners. The house's turbulent past unfolded, changing hands 6 times in a decade, each family departing after a brief stay, selling at decreasing prices. None had divulged a basement's existence. "We must interview every former owner," Connors directed, flipping through her notes. The case grew more sinister as they delved into the property's history. Inconsistencies marred the record's altered blueprints, withdrawn permits, redacted inspection reports. A breakthrough emerged during the contractor's interrogation, who had renovated the house years ago. His pallor drained at the sight of the basement photos. "That room isn't real," he insisted, hands trembling. "I gutted that place to the bone. No basement, no door, just dirt and concrete." Data extracted from a hidden memory card revealed a trove of images not just of the Mercers, but of past families, capturing intimate moments and mundane routines. The discovery took a darker turn with recovered audio files, unveiling clandestine recordings from concealed microphones within the house. "We must tear down walls," Connors urged, her tone urgent. "Check vents, fixtures, outlets. Someone has been watching these families for years." A hidden passage behind the photographs led to a monitoring station desk, chair, laptop linked to wireless cameras, and a journal detailing each family's life. The journal's final entries grew frenzied, hinting at a looming intrusion. "The next family arrives tomorrow," it ominously stated. Fingerprint matches confirmed the unthinkable. Edward Kelvin, the house's elusive builder, had never left. He lurked within its secret spaces, observing families like specimens in a private exhibit. The manhunt ended with Kelvin's discovery in a crawl space, his emaciated form a product of navigating the hidden passages. During interrogation, he spoke of families as his characters, his presence justified as a guardian of his permanent abode. A psychological evaluation diagnosed severe delusions, painting the families as mere visitors in his distorted reality. The Mercers fled, leaving their possessions behind like those before them. The house stood vacant as the trial revealed Kelvin's intricate surveillance network. The property, designed as a voyeuristic apparatus, had entwined families unwittingly in Kelvin's obsession. As the jury rendered its verdict, Kelvin remained stoic, lost within the labyrinth of his mind. The house met its end, but the families carried the weight of unseen eyes and ears, questioning their solitude within walls once deemed secure. In moments of silence, they gazed at vents and fixtures, pondering if they were ever truly alone, haunted by the chilling realization that they may never have been. Story 25. The old house had sat silent and empty for years, shrouded in whispers of a young woman's mysterious disappearance. When the new occupants crossed its threshold, they were met with a peculiar sight: the bedroom door stubbornly locked from within. With a creak and a push, they ventured inside, greeted by the stagnant air heavy with the weight of neglect. Yet amidst the layers of dust, an eerie sense of something amiss lingered. The bed neatly made, the mirror devoid of smudges, a lone candle extinguished, its wax frozen in time like tears of the past. Upon the desk lay a weathered notebook, its pages whispering secrets in fresh ink. Detective Morgan delved into its contents as forensic experts combed the room for elusive clues. The script belonged to Elise Winters, a young soul vanished without a trace, her precise handwriting narrating a chilling tale. Each stroke of the pen chronicled a descent into paranoia, culminating in a haunting declaration on the eve of her disappearance. "I know he's watching me tonight," the final entry echoed through the room. "The same car circles like a predator. My cries for help fall on deaf ears. If fate intervenes, know it was no happenstance." The detective closed the tome, a shiver dancing down his spine as he secured it in an evidence bag. A faint scent lingered in the air, a blend of dust and an elusive chemical hint, a ghostly reminder of unseen truths. The landlord, a pallid specter in the doorway, murmured of thorough inspections and unlocked doors. Elise, a diligent paralegal entangled in the web of Harriman and Associates, unraveled a sinister thread before her vanishing act. Colleagues painted a portrait of a meticulous mind veiled in shadows, unraveling a tangled web of deceit within the firm's clandestine dealings. The room held its secrets close, revealing little beyond a facade frozen in time. No trace of violence, no crimson stains to mark a struggle, only a snapshot of a life abruptly halted. The detective's gaze wandered, seeking answers amid the stillness, the silent witness of a room untouched by time. Beneath the veil of obscurity, a hidden cache awaited discovery, a waterproof case harboring keys to locked truths. The vault's contents unveiled a dark tapestry of deception, linking Elise's fate to a corporate cabal ensnared in a web of deceit. The digital relics whispered of altered truths, of lives sacrificed on the altar of greed. As threads unraveled and shadows danced, the truth emerged from the shadows. Harriman's dark deeds cast a pall over Elise's fate, sealing his own demise. The phantom of justice, though elusive, found its mark in the quiet chamber where secrets lay entombed. The courtroom's hushed whispers bore witness to the reckoning as the specter of Elise's legacy loomed large. Her mother's voice, a haunting echo of a life cut short, reverberated through the halls of justice. The house, a silent sentinel, stood as a testament to a life extinguished but not forgotten. The new tenants, haunted by the echoes of the past, shunned the house, leaving it to the mercy of time's relentless march. Locals whispered of a spectral light in the upper window, a flicker of remembrance for the woman who dared challenge the shadows. In the stillness of the night, the house stood as a monument to a soul lost but not silenced. Elise's legacy, a whisper in the wind, a testament to the enduring power of truth in a world cloaked in shadows. Story 26. In the quiet of the night, a flicker danced across the baby monitor screen, a fleeting anomaly that caught the mother's attention. At first, she brushed it off as mere interference, a glitch in the technology that often plagued devices of its kind. But then the crackling static of the audio was pierced by a soft, haunting whisper, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down her spine, her heartbeat quickening as her instincts screamed of danger. With trembling hands, she hurried to her son's room, dread pooling in her stomach. The crib stood empty, a stark void in the dimly lit nursery. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only disruption in the room's serenity was the stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed on her with an eerie intensity. Rebecca's terror erupted into a primal scream that tore through the silence of the night, her voice raw with anguish. The neighbors, stirred by her cries, summoned help, and soon the authorities arrived, their presence casting a shadow over the once peaceful home. They found Rebecca on the nursery floor, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest, a broken mother in a shattered reality. Samuel, her 4-month-old infant, had vanished without a single trace left behind, swallowed by the darkness that had infiltrated their lives. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery, a puzzle with missing pieces that refused to fit together. There were no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered, no disturbances except for the inexplicable disappearance of the child. Suspicion clung to Rebecca like a suffocating cloak, her strained marriage, her battle with postpartum depression, her unnervingly composed demeanor in the face of unspeakable loss all painted her as the prime suspect in the eyes of the world that whispered behind closed doors. But then a glimmer of hope pierced the darkness. Tiny fibers foreign to the household were discovered on the nursery windowsill, a silent clue that hinted at an intruder's stealthy entrance from the outside. The focus shifted, revealing a shadowy figure captured by neighboring security cameras, a phantom moving with purpose in the dead of night. A footprint, a specialized boot, a thread of evidence that wove a tapestry of deceit. When Daniel, the absent husband, returned, his presence brought a new wave of suspicion crashing down. His hands bore the calluses of a climber, his alibis faltered under scrutiny. A second family, a hidden life, a web of lies that ensnared them all in a tangled mess of betrayal. The truth unraveled like a thread pulled loose, exposing a sinister plot hatched in the shadows of broken hearts and shattered dreams. The baby monitor, a silent witness to the events that unfolded, held the key to unlocking the mystery. Its digital heart laid bare the truth, revealing a tale of manipulation and deception. The voice that whispered in the night was not a phantom within the nursery, but a calculated ploy orchestrated from afar, a cruel trick played on a mother's unsuspecting heart. In a musty basement, the pieces fell into place, as Samuel was found cradled in the arms of a woman named Elaine, a ghost from the past seeking solace in stolen moments. Her eyes, vacant and haunted, spoke of a grief that had twisted into obsession, a longing for a child lost long ago. The courtroom hushed as the damning evidence unfolded, a web of deceit that ensnared them all in its sticky embrace. Daniel and Elaine, their guilt laid bare, faced the consequences of their actions, the weight of their crimes heavy on their shoulders. Rebecca, scarred but resilient, embraced a new beginning, a fresh start far from the shadows of the past. Samuel, innocent and unknowing, grew up in the light of a new dawn, shielded from the darkness that once threatened to consume them all. The stuffed rabbit, a silent sentinel of the truth, remained locked away, a silent witness to the horrors that had transpired. Its glassy black eyes held the secrets of that fateful night, a night when the baby monitor spoke of a darkness that lurked just beyond the reach of sight. The truth, though bitter and twisted, had finally come to light, a beacon in the night for those who dared to listen. Story 27. The aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its creaking floors and time-worn walls holding secrets of bygone days. The heating system groaned in protest, the pipes rattled like a distant melody. It was all part of the building's character, or so she tried to convince herself. But then in the stillness of the night she heard it, a voice, soft and elusive, drifting through the vents like a ghostly whisper. It wasn't the usual sounds of neighbors going about their lives. This was different. It called to her, uttering her name in a hushed tone that sent shivers down her spine. With a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, she leaned in closer, pressing her ear against the metal grate, her heart quickening in her chest. A breath of icy air brushed against her cheek, and then almost teasingly came the words, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the center of the vacant apartment, the air heavy with unspoken mysteries. Her eyes focused on the rusted vent cover, forcibly removed from its place on the wall. The forensics team moved with precision, capturing every detail with their cameras as if trying to freeze the moment in time. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had been absent for a week before the building's neglect revealed her whereabouts. What they uncovered within the ventilation system defied logic. She claimed to hear voices through the vents, Officer Patel recited from his notes, but the building management dismissed her concerns, attributing it to the quirks of an old building. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the deep scratches surrounding it. These marks were not made by tools. They bore the frantic desperation of someone trying to escape from within. The chilling realization dawned on her. Alina had been a beloved figure, a gentle soul known for her nurturing ways as a kindergarten teacher. Her disappearance had left a void in the lives of those who knew her. Her absence felt like a lingering shadow. Her sister, during an emotional interview, revealed Alina's growing paranoia in the days leading up to her vanishing. The belief that unseen eyes watched her, voices whispered through the vents dismissed as mere stress at the time. Surveying the apartment anew, Shaw noticed subtle details that spoke volumes. The orderly bed, the neglected coffee mug, the chair placed strategically beneath the vent as if someone had been eavesdropping. Clues began to weave a tapestry of a life interrupted, a presence unseen but deeply felt. The forensic analysis unearthed startling revelations. Fibers from Alina's favorite cardigan entwined in the vent, a foreign fingerprint on the interior of the cover not belonging to the victim. Yet the most chilling discoveries came from the recordings retrieved from Alina's phone. Alone in her car, rain drumming a melancholic rhythm, Shaw listened to the spectral dialogues captured in whispers. The history of the building cast a shadow over the investigation. Former tenants had fled, citing strange occurrences within the walls. A dark pattern emerged, hinting at a malevolent force lurking in the shadows. The building superintendent, Harold Weber, appeared unassuming on the surface, but his facade cracked under Shaw's scrutiny. A subtle shift in demeanor, a veil of secrecy draped over his past tenants. A hidden passage discovered in a leaner's bathroom led to a clandestine network of tunnels within the walls, an eerie realm where someone had dwelled, observing, whispering. Shaw's team uncovered a trove of incriminating evidence in Weber's possession, linking him to a macabre obsession with those he watched. His arrest was met with an eerie calm, a chilling prophecy of voices echoing through the building. As the truth unfurled, a chilling narrative emerged of a predator ensnaring souls within the building's confines. Victims lured into a labyrinth of deception, seduced by whispers promising solace in the heart of darkness. Weber's trial painted a portrait of a man consumed by delusions, a puppet of the building's malevolent will. The echoes of his crimes lingered in the vacant apartment building, a haunting reminder of the darkness that dwelled within its walls. Despite attempts at renewal, a pall of unease descended upon its residents. Whispers carried on the wind, chilling drafts seeping through the vents, a spectral presence that refused to be silenced. The building retained its secrets, a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded within its aging frame.